Chapter 1966. The god domain, which was originally extremely sturdy and oppressive, started to crumble uncontrollably. In just a short while, those Shin formations were like a dazzling giant net, closing in on Iwentao. Iwentao's expression changed drastically. Even if he was a top-notch supreme god expert, it was impossible for him to deal with the siege of so many Shin formations at the same time. He quickly circulated the force in his body, and the totem on his forehead flashed. A figure that was almost identical to him appeared in front of him. Then the figure started to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had grown to the height of Iwentao and the other two. The eyes of the god body had a deep, dark blue color. Cold and disdainful. Divine body of 8 directions. Nan Suhuai murmured as he stared at the divine body. Iwentao's divine body was extremely rare, and its combat power was extremely strong. It was rumored that the divine body of 8 directions was created by the family Yi's ancestors, and only members of the family Yi could cultivate it. However, because it was extremely difficult to cultivate, there were not many who could actually succeed. Most members of the family Yi would choose to cultivate other divine bodies after they failed. And once it was successful, the strength of the cultivator would greatly increase. This was also why Iwentao was able to sit firmly in the position of family Yi for so many years, and he had absolute authority in the family. Nan Suhuai had only heard of it before, but he had never seen it with his own eyes. He did not expect to see Iwentao summoning the divine body of 8 directions at this moment. Then, under everyone's gaze, the divine body took a step forward, raised its hand and punched out. The energy of heaven and earth in the surroundings surged madly and gathered into a huge gust of wind from the fist. Iwentao's mind moved, and the gust of wind from the fist swept out. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The divine body of 8 directions smashed the Shen formation at the front with its fist. That Shen formation instantly shattered into countless pieces, shining faintly and scattering in all directions. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly, and his finger quickly slid across the flowing clouds flying diagram. Those streams of light seemed to have sensed something and surged over. Like raindrops falling into the sea, they were quickly annihilated. Chu Luiyue lowered her gaze to take a look. The small square where the profound formation was located originally had a brilliant color, but at this moment, it had already dimmed quite a bit. It could be seen that Iwentao's attack had a huge impact on the profound formation. Fortunately, after this destroyed profound formation returned, although it was greatly damaged, it continued to absorb the surrounding energy of heaven and earth, using it to replenish its own strength. Seeing the color slowly returning, Chu Luiyue let out a long sigh of relief. The Shen formation on the flowing cloud flying diagram could be summoned multiple times. Even if it was destroyed by force, as long as there was enough heaven and earth energy to replenish it, there would still be a day when it could be restored. However, it might take a little longer. Iwentao destroyed a profound formation with a single punch, causing everyone's expression to change. As expected of the divine body of 8 directions. It really lives up to its reputation. Nan Suhuai looked at Chu Luiyue with a slightly worried expression. Although she had the flowing cloud flying diagram in her hand, her realm was still far from Iwentao's. There was a huge gap between the two of them and it wasn't that easy to cross it. Iwentao wasn't that easy to deal with. Shangguan Jing and the rest were also watching the situation on the stage closely. Zhao Song couldn't help but say, "Brother Shangguan, Iwentao's divine body of 8 directions is a top-notch divine body in the world." It said that the last time he publicly summoned the divine body of 8 directions was a few decades ago. It's really amazing that your little girl could force him to this extent in such a short period of time. But then again, now that he's going all out, I'm afraid your little girl will be in danger. Iwentao was a ruthless character. Since he dared to come this time, he must have great confidence. After not seeing him for so many years, his divine body of 8 directions had become even stronger. The Peach Blossom Dock was such a good place. If he really had to give it up because of this loss, even he couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. Shangguan Jing placed his hands behind his back and squinted his eyes slightly. Iwentao is indeed powerful, but isn't someone to be trifled with either. His tone was calm, but it was filled with great confidence. It was as though he was certain that Chu Luiyue would win this round. Zhao Song turned around and exchanged glances with the rest behind him. They could see that Chu Luiyue was indeed very powerful, but compared to Iwentao, she was still lacking, right? This divine body of 8 directions, boom. Another violent shattering sound was heard. The second Shin formation was forcefully destroyed by Iwentao's divine body of 8 directions. The atmosphere among the crowd seemed to have become even more tense. The Xian formations were shattered one after another, but Chu Luiyue remained standing on the same spot, as though she didn't have any reaction. She looked ahead quietly, and her beautiful face was filled with calmness. Waves seemed to be surging in that pair of deep black eyes, as though she was thinking about something. Seeing that Yi Wentao was like a hot knife through butter, many people started to get anxious. What exactly was Chu Luiyue planning to do? She couldn't possibly be prepared to admit defeat just like that, right? Yi Wentao looked on coldly, and a mocking smile flashed across his face. The flowing cloud flying diagram was indeed powerful. Chu Luiyue was able to take it for herself and comprehend the mystery within it. It was her ability. With this item, cultivators only needed to expend a bit of energy to trigger the Xian formation, and they would be able to unleash several times the power. It was truly a rare treasure. However, many people had neglected one thing. Even if each Xian formation only required a bit of energy to activate, these dozens of Xian formations were not a small number when put together. Chu Luiyue couldn't possibly hold on forever. Hence, as long as these Xian formations were dealt with, Chu Luiyue would be completely unable to continue the battle. Yi Wentao thought about this and began to channel his energy even more crazily. Boom boom boom. All sorts of explosive sounds could be heard. It was almost deafening. The violent energy spread in all directions. Many people hurriedly set up barriers in front of them, and with great difficulty, they managed to block the energy outside. Even so, there were still a few weaker people who couldn't withstand the pressure and spat out blood as they retreated. The Peach Blossom Cove's barrier shook again. Ayu, Dumpling widened her eyes and wanted to go forward. Zichen frowned slightly, caught her outstretched hand and stuffed it back. Dumpling was a small and soft person. She was easily held in Zichen's arms and she couldn't break free. If you go over now, you'll only cause trouble for her, Zichen said lightly. Dumpling heard this and finally gave up struggling. She clenched her fists tightly and stared straight ahead. She couldn't cause trouble. She had to help Ayu. Swoosh. A reddish-gold flame suddenly appeared in her eyes. Almost at the same time, the sky quickly darkened. Zichen was shocked and looked up immediately. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1967. This sudden commotion caused everyone present to be shocked, and they all raised their heads to look. What's going on? Is someone about to break through? Or, is it because those two are fighting? It doesn't seem like it. Everyone was talking about it and they were all confused. Yi Wentao and Chu Luiyue had been fighting for a while. If this commotion was really caused by the two of them, it should have come a long time ago. It shouldn't have come now, right? Then, the rich energy of heaven and earth quickly formed a huge vortex and rushed down. When they saw the direction of the vortex, many people sucked in a breath of cold air. It seemed to be going for the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Zichen quickly realized something and glanced at Dumpling in his arms. Dumpling looked up, and the dim light of the sky was reflected in her grape-like eyes. Zichen put Dumpling down and took a few steps back, but his eyes were still fixed on Dumpling. The moment he stepped back, the energy in the sky quickly descended and rushed into Dumpling's body. Her body was like a bottomless pit, crazily devouring all the energy around her. Chu Luiyue looked back at Dumpling, and a trace of surprise flashed in her eyes. She was swoosh. A crimson gold feather suddenly broke through the air. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She guessed right. Dumpling was preparing to open her fifth meridian? But how long had it been since she last opened her meridian? In such a short time, Dumpling was going to. Suddenly, a light flashed in her mind. Dumpling was converting the energy that Yi Wentao forced into her body into her own. That was the true power of a god. In fact, after Chu Luiyue passed the god-destroying tribulation, she noticed that Dumpling and Zichen's strength had increased a lot. This time, with the help of Yi Wentao's power, it was reasonable for Dumpling to want to break through. However, other than Chu Luiyue, everyone present had never personally witnessed the crimson gold celestial phoenix meridian opening. Therefore, when the golden feather appeared, many people were stunned. It wasn't until the feather floated in front of Dumpling that someone finally came to a realization. That's the feather of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. As soon as he finished speaking, many people finally regained their senses. Those were indeed the feathers of a scarlet gold heavenly phoenix. It was entirely scarlet gold, flickering with radiance. But why did this thing suddenly appear? Just as everyone was at a loss, the feather began to gently move in the air. At the same time, Dumpling closed her eyes and the flames around her body surged wildly. Her aura began to rise crazily. Miao Fushan was the first to recover from his shock. Is she going to open her meridians? The two ancient divine beast clans had always been in a subtle relationship of opposition and competition. Sometimes they knew each other better than they knew each other. In addition, Miao Fushan's seniority was extremely high. He had personally witnessed the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan opening their meridians. Therefore, when he saw this scene, he immediately recognized it. His words were like a stone that fell into the lake, splashing countless waves in an instant. Everyone was in an uproar. Opening her meridians. Although this term was not common to them, it didn't mean that they didn't understand what it meant. Those present were all people with status and strength, so they basically understood what it meant. How old is that Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix? She's already opening her meridians? Since she has already transformed into a human form, it means that she has already opened her meridians. But the point is, why is it starting now? How many meridians has she opened? No, if she's opening her meridians, then, as the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, Yi Zhao and the rest should have noticed it, right? I clearly saw that she was on the verge of dying. Why is she suddenly opening her meridians now? This contracted divine beast of Xuanhuan is as unpredictable as her. Everyone was discussing animatedly. Yi Wentao also noticed the situation here and immediately frowned. Soon, he figured out the crux of the matter and couldn't help but secretly grit his teeth. This Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix was really cunning. Not only was it not defeated by his power, but it also transformed into its own power and even opened her meridians directly. Yi Wentao took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Even if it's opening her meridians, it's not a big deal. How old is this phoenix? Even if it's opening her meridians, it should only be opening the second meridians, the third meridians at most. Even if it's successful, it can't make any waves. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, he saw several golden rays appear in front of Dumpling in succession. 1, 2, 3, 4. The crimson gold feather drew the fifth meridians. Yi Wentao's brain seemed to have been hit by something and was completely stunned. The fifth meridians. Isn't this opening her fifth meridians? She's crazy. In the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, there aren't many who have opened their fifth meridians. What's more, this is an underage. His heart started to beat rapidly. I have to stop her. Otherwise today's battle would have been really dangerous. He did as he thought. At this time, Yi Wentao had already solved the several barriers in front of him. After seeing Dumpling's movements, his mind moved, and the 8 directions godly body rushed forward without hesitation. Boom. The huge and muscular figure walked forward, leaving deep footprints on the ground as it shook. At this moment, Chu Liyue's body suddenly shone brightly. A gorgeous light soft armor instantly covered her entire body. A terrifying aura suddenly descended upon them. Chapter 1969. Yi Wentao did not understand what Chu Liyue meant at first. That was until he realized that the power of the profound formations was still rising. His eyes shrunk, and he then realized that Chu Liyue was burning her own force to forcefully support these Xian formations. Not only did her origin power not burn out like he had expected, it was even abundant to the point that she was able to divert a considerable amount of energy to control these profound formations when she was fighting with his omnidirectional divine body. Countless terrifying energies came from the profound formations and began to strangle Yi Wentao. Without the protection of the omnidirectional divine body, Yi Wentao's physical strength was very limited. Even though he was a god, he did not have a divine body and could not fight against these profound formations bare-chested. There were many Grandmaster-level profound formations inside. The last remaining divine domain around Yi Wentao began to collapse. A heavy pressure fell on his body, heavy and painful. Intense pain came from every part of his body. Yi Wentao was so shocked that he could not speak. Chu Liyue was definitely only a high god. They had fought before, so he was very sure of this. But how did she store such an astonishing amount of origin power in her body? Even he faintly felt that he was indeed slightly inferior at this moment. Yi Wentao was not the only one who had the same question. In fact, when Chu Liyue took action again and controlled the profound formations, almost everyone present was stunned. A cultivator's body was like a container. Every level of cultivator had a certain upper limit. Once this upper limit was exceeded, the cultivator could very well explode and die. This was the invisible barrier created by the level of strength. Normally, the origin power stored in a high god expert's body was definitely not comparable to a high god expert's. Sometimes, the difference between the two could be several times or even 10 times. But now, everyone could see that Chu Liyue had crushed Yi Wentao in this aspect. An endless stream of energy gushed out from her body, as if it would never be exhausted. The smug smile on Yiwen's face suddenly froze. How is this possible? She has accumulated so much origin power in her body, but she didn't explode and die? If it were anyone else, their pill of essence and physical body would not be able to withstand it. Over at the Nan family and family Yi's side, the originally boisterous and lively atmosphere instantly froze. Yuantao was thinking crazily. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. He couldn't just sit there and wait for death. He was clearly aware of the consequences of being surrounded and annihilated by these profound formations if he continued to stay here. He had to avoid these troubles first. Thinking of this, Yuantao suddenly raised his head. With a thought, he tried to recall his omnidirectional divine body. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly opened his palms and grabbed the divine body's wrists with both hands. Yuantao's heart sank. Xuanhuan you? How dare you? Chu Luiyue did not seem to hear him at all. The origin power around her surged wildly and poured into both of her palms. Then, she abruptly raised her chi and forcefully dragged the divine body into the air. Her slender and flexible waist spun. The huge divine body of 8 directions, which was several times bigger than her, was then violently flung away by Chu Luiyue. At this moment, Yuantao was distracted and let Chu Luiyue succeed in flinging the divine body of 8 directions far away. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy and hurried footsteps could be heard. The divine body of 8 directions left a few deep footprints on the ground before it could stabilize itself. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue was standing between Yuantao's physical body and his divine body. Yuantao gritted his teeth in hatred. Chu Luiyue was clearly doing this on purpose. Yuantao's anger reached its peak. The last string in his brain was stretched taut. A totem quickly appeared between his eyebrows. Then he moved his body, intending to force his way out. At this moment, a black figure suddenly appeared behind Yuantao. Was Zichen. He looked at Yuantao with a cold and disdainful gaze, as if he was looking at an ant. Yuantao felt a chill at the back of his head and subconsciously turned around to look. The huge net formed by the Xian formations had surrounded almost 3/4 of the space around him, leaving only a small space behind him. However, he did not expect Zichen to appear here. Yuantao's intuition told him that something was wrong. Subsequently, a vast and distant howl resounded from Zichen's body. It seemed to be the cry of a legendary 3-eyed eagle, but also the cry of a dragon. Then, a purple gold flowing light flew out from between his eyebrows. The sound of a sharp weapon piercing through flesh could be heard for a short while. Yuantao did not dodge in time, and one of his shoulders was sliced off. Blood dripped. Yuantao spat out a mouthful of blood, shocked and furious. You, Chi. At this moment, another clear cry of a phoenix soared into the sky. On the other side, Ancestor Golden Feather had finally completed the 5th strand. 5th meridian, open. Dumpling's aura surged. Her body was still burning with golden flames, and she looked like a ball of fire as she charged toward Yuantao. Leave your remaining arm to me. Chu Luiyue's figure moved, and she harshly kicked the all-directional divine body. The omnidirectional divine body immediately crossed its arms and blocked in front of it. Crack. The crisp sound of bones breaking could be heard. Then, everyone saw that the omnidirectional divine body's arms were bent at an extremely strange angle. The one who lost was Yuantao's omnidirectional divine body. Digression. Mobile users at 7 p.m., please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1970. As the two exchanged blows, Chu Luiyue's divine body actually cracked Yuantao's omnidirectional divine body? The scene in front of them was so shocking that the expressions of the Nan family and family E became unusually interesting. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed that the divine body of a high god could defeat the divine body of an honorable god. Even if they told others about this, they would be treated as a joke. On the other side, Shengguan Jing and the others were also deeply shocked. Although Rong Xiu had already explained that Chu Luiyue's divine body was tempered by the god-destroying tribulation, they had only heard of it and had never seen it with their own eyes. Otherwise, no one would have recognized Chu Luiyue when he summoned his divine body. The god-destroying tribulation could only be summoned by an extremely small number of honorable gods. Those who could successfully pass it were even rarer. They did not even think about it in the beginning. If not for Rong Xiu's reminder, they would still be confused. The power of Chu Luiyue's divine body had also shocked them. This could no longer be described as simply powerful. This was clearly heaven-defying. SSS. Brother Shengguan, this junior of yours is really... Zhao Song was conflicted for a while and could not think of any words to express his feelings at this moment. In the end, he could only smile helplessly and shake his head. His eyes were filled with undisguised admiration and envy. You're really lucky. This kind of fortune was really something that others could only envy. In the Divine Ruins world, there were countless aristocratic families and clans. Every family would spend countless resources and effort to nurture the younger generation. What was the reason? Wasn't it so that the glory of the family could be passed down from generation to generation? Only when the descendants were outstanding enough would they have enough glory on their faces and the family be able to continue on. However, Chu Liyue alone had done so much. Indeed, she was born outside the Divine Ruins world. Compared to the disciples of the aristocratic families, her starting point was much lower. However, it could not stop her from being extremely talented and destined by the heavens. Which one of the people present today was not an extremely outstanding genius when they were young? However, compared to Chu Liyue, they were greatly inferior. Even someone like Zhao Song sighed at his own inferiority. Xuanhuan Jing did not say anything. His eyes were fixed on Chu Liyue, who was in the arena, and his eyes were glistening. Xuanhuan Jing's descendant was naturally the most outstanding. Zhao Song looked at Rong Xiu and sighed with emotion. The saint's eyes. Rong Xiu's lips curved up slightly, and he happily agreed with the compliment. He had always been like that. Chu Liyue took advantage of the situation and continued forward. This time she didn't use any divine artifacts. She just directly went up to fight. Every punch hit the flesh. The divine body and the god was passively. The god was gods as a passive as a. A series of dull thuds and the sound of bones breaking alternated. Everyone felt their scalps go numb. However, Chu Liyue's expression did not change at all from the beginning to the end. Even her eyes were filled with fighting spirit. She did not say a word. She only cared about attacking and beating up the divine body of 8 directions. On the other side, Dumpling quickly passed through those Xian formations and came to Zichen's side. She looked at Yi Wentao with a burning gaze. She licked her lips and crossed her small hands, making cracking sounds. Zichen wanted to continue, but he stopped when he heard her voice. Seeing Dumpling's eager look, Zichen raised his eyebrows slightly. Can you do it? After all, she was injured just now. Zichen meant well, but in Dumpling's ears it was not the case. She rubbed her nose. Who are you looking down on? I'll cut off one of his arms right now for you to see. Yi Wentao almost choked when he heard that. That was a great humiliation to him. Since when did he, the dignified head of family Yi, become an object for them to bet on? And they were betting on his arm. At that thought, Yi Wentao looked at his bleeding wound and gnashed his teeth in hatred. However, at that moment, Dumpling had already moved. She raised her hand and a crimson gold flame suddenly rose from her palm. Then, with a wave of her small hand, the flame instantly transformed into a long whip and lashed wildly at Yi Wentao. Wherever the flame passed, the void collapsed one after another. Yi Wentao was shocked. A crimson gold sky phoenix who had opened the 5th meridian had grown so much in strength. In fact, although he had interacted with the crimson gold sky phoenix clan before, he did not know much about them, nor had he fought with a crimson gold sky phoenix who had opened the 5th meridian. Generally speaking, people of this level could be elders in the clan. Yi Wentao would not find trouble for no reason and offend an elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan for no reason. It was also because of this that Dumpling's attack was far beyond Yi Wentao's expectations. The flame came rapidly, causing the surrounding temperature to rise rapidly and become boiling hot. The sticky and sweet blood stains on Yi Wentao's body quickly dried up because of this, leaving only dark red and stiff traces of blood. The flame whip tore through the air. Yi Wentao originally wanted to forcibly take this move, but Zichen's previous attack had caused great damage to him, forcing him to choose to retreat now. However, he was fast, but Dumpling's flame was faster. The flame flashed in front of him, and Yi Wentao suddenly felt a surge of uneasiness. Then, a heart-wrenching burning pain came from his other arm. It was the flame whip that was tightly wrapped around his remaining arm. Dumpling did not hesitate and pulled fiercely. The sound of blood and bone tearing could be heard. Yi Wentao did not have time to think of a way to defend himself before Dumpling tore off his arm. Now, only 2 bloody wounds were left on his shoulders. It was a ghastly sight. The thick smell of blood permeated the air, and it was almost nauseating. Dumpling waved her hand disdainfully, and then raised her head proudly. How is it? As Zichen watched, the corners of his lips suddenly curled up. Dumpling was stunned. What was he smiling about? At this moment Chu Liwe finally stopped. The 8 directions divine bodies had been beaten to a pulp by her and could not retaliate at all. She turned around and raised her eyebrows. Very good. Leave his life to me. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1971. As soon as she finished speaking, Chu Liu's figure disappeared from where she was standing. Yuantao instinctively turned around when he heard the sound. He saw a flash of light and shadow in front of him. Then the void started to vibrate and ripple. A suffocating pressure came over him. The blood in his body seemed to freeze at this moment. Then, a hand suddenly broke through the void and came toward him. It was a slender and fair hand. It was covered with a layer of beautiful soft armor that glowed faintly. At first glance it looked like a pearl or jade. Yuantao was stunned for a moment. Then he was shocked. This was Chu Liu's hand. Sure enough, in the next moment, Chu Liu's figure also rushed out from behind the void. Yuantao immediately retreated without hesitation. However, Zichen and Dumpling were standing behind him. Where could he run to? Zichen waved his sleeve and sent out a blast of energy. It formed a translucent boundary and blocked Yuantao's escape route. Yuantao sensed the cold aura coming from behind him. He did not need to turn around to know what was going on. At this moment he was in a dilemma. Large beads of sweat appeared on Yuantao's forehead. Almost instantly his back was drenched in cold sweat. His face was pale and his lips were trembling. Before this, Yuantao would never have thought that he would be forced into such a corner by Chu Liue. In fact, he did not underestimate Chu Liue at all. All the things that had happened to her during this period of time had proven that she was definitely more difficult to deal with than the average great deity. Therefore, Yuantao did not care about his reputation and used his status as a great deity to half-coerce Chu Liue into fighting with him. He thought that this would be a sure win for him. Who would have thought that? Bang! Chu Liue punched Yuantao in the chest. Yuantao's body flew out in an instant and landed heavily on the ground. Whoosh, boom. His body left a long trail of blood on the ground as he crashed into the barrier set up by Zichen. Yuantao's body shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura instantly weakened. Patriarch. When the family E members saw this, they could not help but exclaim in shock. Everything happened too quickly. Zichen and Dumpling attacked one after another, followed by Chu Liue. Everyone only felt that the scene in front of them was a mess. When they looked again they saw that Yuantao had already fallen to such a state. Without his arms, his omnidirectional divine body had also been severely injured. All of this was fatal to Yuantao. He lay on the ground on the verge of death. He kept spitting out blood and he looked battered and exhausted. Chu Liue walked up to him. When Yuantao heard the commotion he struggled to get up. But now, such a simple action was already extremely difficult for him. Chu Liue walked to him and stood still as she looked down at him. Family E, it looks like, you're not as powerful as I thought you were? This sentence was like a slap to Yuantao's face. Yuantao raised his head with difficulty. His eyes were filled with hatred. Yo. Chu Liue looked up at Family E and the Nan family members with a half-smile. You brought so many people to openly steal my peach blossom dock. I thought Patriarch Family E was extremely powerful. I didn't expect, or did I overestimate you? Everyone was extremely aggrieved. Their faces turned pale. Yuantao finally couldn't help but shout. Xuanhuan, you. Don't be too arrogant. You. Before he could finish speaking, Chu Liue suddenly raised his leg and stomped heavily on Yuantao's chest. Crack. The sound of bones breaking. Yuantao's face turned red. His chest caved in. Chu Liue's stomp had broken a few of his ribs. Yuantao, your brother is in such a state now. If I'm not arrogant, do you think he's the arrogant one? Why don't you ask your own brother if he can still be arrogant? Chu Liue used a lot of force in this kick, and it directly caused the energy in Yuantao's body to go crazy. This forced him to be unable to say a single word. He opened his mouth and forcefully spat out a few vague and bloody syllables. Yuantao's face was ashen. Chu Liue's stomp was on Yuantao's body as well as on Family Yi's head. How could they bear it? However, they had to bear it even if they couldn't. They didn't want to see the situation turn for the worse with their own eyes. At this moment, Jun Jiuqing suddenly stepped forward and said, You've won this round. Family E is willing to accept defeat. Family E was shocked. They didn't expect Jun Jiuqing to suddenly speak at this time. One of the elders frowned and said, That's right. Young master, family head hasn't admitted defeat. Don't you think it's a little inappropriate for you to do this? Jun Jiuqing frowned slightly. A hint of coldness appeared in his eyes. Chu Luiyue also laughed. Yes. The one who will be competing with me is Patriarch Yi, not any of you present here. This sentence has to be said by family head Family Yi personally. As she spoke, she lowered her head and looked at Yi Wentao. Family head Family Yi, what do you think? Yi Wentao's heart was filled with hatred. Of course, he didn't want to admit defeat in front of so many people. However, if he didn't admit defeat, the current situation was almost impossible to reverse. He closed his eyes and spoke with difficulty. Before he could say a word, Chu Luiyue exerted force with her foot, forcing Yi Wentao to swallow the rest of his words. Intense pain came from all over his body, especially his chest. It seemed like there was a heavy weight on it, making it difficult for him to breathe and unable to say a word. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Oh? It seems that family head Family Yi still doesn't want to admit defeat. Yi Wentao's eyes rolled back and he almost fainted from anger. At this moment, everyone in the family Yi also realized that the family head wasn't unwilling to admit defeat. It was clearly Chu Luiyue who was deliberately preventing him from speaking. Since family head Yi is so stubborn, then I can only convince you with my strength. Chu Luiyue shook her head regretfully and was about to continue. It seemed like she was really going to beat Yi Wentao to death. Stop. Yi Wentao hurriedly spoke, shocked and angry. Who couldn't tell that Chu Luiyue was doing this on purpose? She was clearly trying to kill Yi Wentao. Chu Luiyue didn't stop moving. She didn't take Yi Wentao's words seriously at all. She raised her leg and took a step to the side. Then she stepped on Yi Wentao's ankle. Crack. The sound of bones breaking was especially hair-raising. Yi Wentao didn't have any strength to retaliate. He was in so much pain that his entire body trembled. He kept vomiting blood and almost fainted. His appearance was truly miserable. Jun Jiuqing turned around and glanced at the elder who tried to stop her and sneered. Now, do you still think that what I did just now was inappropriate? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1972. The elder's expression was ugly, but he did not say a word. Although he was embarrassed by Jun Jiuqing's public questioning, it was clearly not the time to care about this. The remaining members of the family looked at each other in dismay. In fact, Jun Jiuqing was the most suitable person to step forward in this matter. He was the young master, second only to Yi Wentao. Now that Yi Wentao was in trouble, he was the only one who could represent the family Yi. Finally, someone cupped his fists. Young master, please step forward and save family head. As soon as this was said, many people immediately echoed this sentiment. Even Yi Wentao had to suppress the anger in his heart. Although he was Yi Wentao's younger brother, in terms of status in the family Yi, he was now inferior to Jun Jiuqing. Jiuqing. Yi Wentao took a deep breath and urged. After all, ever since Yi Wentao was defeated, they had lost all face. The most important thing now was to save Yi Wentao. Jun Jiuqing's eyes darkened, and he took another step forward. Now that family head is unable to speak, the young master of the family Yi, Jun Jiuqing, will admit defeat on behalf of the family Yi. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly, then stopped what she was doing and looked up. Just now she had heard how those people addressed Jun Jiuqing. After not seeing him for a while, he had actually become the young master of the family Yi? Chu Luiyue was not surprised. This could only prove that Jun Jiuqing's talent and strength were more outstanding than what he had shown before. Otherwise, he would not have been able to win this position in the family Yi, which was full of talents. She looked Jun Jiuqing up and down again. You will admit defeat on behalf of Yi Wentao? Jun Jiuqing nodded. That's right. As long as you stop now and release family head safely, we will agree to any conditions. There was a small commotion in the family Yi crowd, but it quickly subsided. Jun Jiuqing's words were too big, but if they didn't do it now, there was probably no other way. At this point they could tell that Chu Luiyue was extremely vicious and merciless. No one could say for sure what other shocking moves she could make. Therefore, after a brief moment of hesitation, the family Yi members chose to accept. Chu Luiyue chuckled. What qualifications do you have to bargain with me now? Yi Wentao was already in her hands. She could kill him or torture him as she pleased. Don't forget that it was your family Yi who suggested this competition. Regardless of life or death, no one was allowed to interfere. Could it be that all of you have forgotten? Jun Jiuqing frowned. Then what do you want? Yi Wentao's arms had been chopped off and he was on the verge of death. He was even lying on the ground in humiliation, allowing her to step on him. Wasn't that enough? Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly as she stretched out her hand. My conditions are very simple. First, the Great Azure Sun Axe, Belongs to me. The expressions of the family E members instantly became even more unsightly. The Great Azure Sun Axe was one of the 10 great sacred artifacts, and it was also the family Yi's clan treasure. Chu Liuyue's first condition was an exorbitant demand. Wasn't it too much? Some of the Nan family members' expressions were somewhat meaningful. Anyway, their flowing cloud flying diagram had already been snatched away. If the family Yis was also snatched away by Chu Liyue, the losses of those two families were about the same. Although the two sides had formed an alliance for the time being, both sides had vaguely had the intention of fighting openly and covertly for thousands of years. Anyway, things had already come to this. If they could make the family E bleed a little, the gap between them wouldn't be too big in the future. Jun Jiuqing didn't care about the reactions of the people behind him. He nodded. Okay. Chu Liyue didn't mean his answer. She raised her eyes and looked at the ground not far away, at the great azure sun axe that was casually thrown there during the chaotic battle. Dumpling's eyes lit up. She immediately ran over and carried the great azure sun axe. Her figure was petite, and she wasn't even as tall as the great azure sun axe. She carried it on her shoulders with her two small hands. It looked like her head was heavy and her feet were light. It made people worry that she would be swayed by this huge and heavy axe. However, Dumpling quickly used her actions to shatter everyone's false fantasies. She strode forward with her bare feet and in a flash she arrived in front of Chu Liyue. Her speed was so fast that it made people speechless. Such a large piece of axe was as light as a feather in her hands. Everyone looked at her with complicated feelings. As expected of the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, her physical strength was really strong. That's right. She was able to break Yi Wentao's arm with a whip. What was this axe to her? Are you? Here. Dumpling excitedly ran in front of Chu Liyue and handed over the great azure sun axe. At this moment, it was covered with a thin layer of frost. Waves of cold air spread out from it. This was the mark left behind by Zichen's previous attack. Chu Liyue took the great azure sun axe and patted Dumpling's head with praise. Dumpling is awesome. After receiving the praise, Dumpling was elated. She proudly turned her head and raised her small face at Zichen. Her intention to show off couldn't be more obvious. At the crucial moment he still had to rely on her. Chu Liyue glanced at Dumpling and lovingly rubbed the back of her head. After all, she was still a child. She even rushed to run errands. Didn't you see that Zichen didn't move from the beginning? He didn't plan to move at all. Yet this child was still so happy. Chu Liyue sighed silently in his heart. Probably because she was bullied by Zichen in the Heavenly Square Cauldron, Dumpling now wanted to compete with Zichen whenever she encountered a problem. Zichen stood on the spot and calmly nodded. Okay, you win this time. Dumpling put her hands on her waist. Waha, I knew it. I'm the best. Chu Liyue, Zichen, everyone. Chu Liyue looked at Dumpling sympathetically. She didn't know how much work she would have to do in the future when she encountered an opponent like Zichen. She coughed, looked away and looked at Yi Wentao. Family head Yi, you don't have any objections, right? How could Yi Wentao say no? He closed his eyes and nodded with difficulty. Chu Liyue smiled. Family head Yi is indeed generous. My second condition is actually very simple. I want 30 venerable divine artifacts. Digression, insomnia, I'll take a break. I'll come back at 6 p.m. Woo mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1973. Yi Wentao's face flushed red. He widened his eyes and stared at Chu Liyue. Although he didn't say anything, his reaction was enough to show his attitude. Yi Wentao couldn't help but shout. Xuanhuan, you're too greedy. 30 venerable artifacts? Why didn't she rob them? Chu Liyue clicked his tongue and looked regretful. Family Yi, it seems that in your brother's eyes your life isn't as important as those dead objects. Yi Wentao trembled with anger. What nonsense are you talking about? When did I say that? You're the one who's greedy and demanding an exorbitant price. Do you know how much 30 venerable artifacts are worth? Chu Liyue looked like she was smiling, and her eyes were filled with coldness. If that's the case then, do you know how much my peach blossom dock is worth? This question immediately made Yi Wenzhua speechless. The rest of the people who wanted to argue and criticize him also shut their mouths. The scene fell into an eerie silence. 30 venerable artifacts were indeed a sky-high price, but it was not on the same level as Peach Blossom Dock. Venerable artifacts could be made as long as there were venerable artificers. As for the number, it was just a matter of time. It was worth noting that Shangguan Jing alone had many venerable artifacts that had survived. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to give away so many at once during Rongxiu's wedding. Therefore, for someone like Family Yi who had a strong foundation, they could definitely afford 30 venerable artifacts. However, it would cost them a lot. However, a place like Peach Blossom Dock was even more precious. It could only be found by chance. Otherwise, it wouldn't have attracted so many aristocratic families over thousands of years to try to take it under their command. Wasn't Family Yi's whole family here for this? At the end of the day, they were the ones who first tried to snatch Chu Liyue's Peach Blossom Dock. Now that Chu Liyue had won the bet and had the upper hand, it seemed there was nothing wrong with making such a request. The two sides fell into a short standoff. Chu Liyue looked relaxed. The reason she wanted these things was simple. The Yu residence has just been established, so there isn't enough stock. There were quite a lot of natural treasures here, and there were also many experts who came to seek refuge. However, there were almost no divine artifacts that could be taken out. Although Chu Liyue was a weapon refiner herself, it was impossible for her to support the entire Yu residence by herself. Now that there was ready-made wool, it would be a waste not to harvest it. What a great opportunity. Chu Liyue felt that he had asked for too little. However, considering that Yi Wentao had already lost both his arms and was basically half dead, she decided to give him a discount. After all, she sincerely wanted to complete this deal. She had to show them her sincerity, right? If Family Yi knew what Chu Liyue was thinking, they would probably vomit blood in anger. Jun Jiuqing turned around and looked at everyone. Elders, what do you think? Everyone groaned inwardly. What else could they do? Could it be that they could refuse? The head of the family was still in Chu Liyue's hands. Moreover, according to the agreement between the two sides, even if she really killed Yi Wentao today, Family Yi had no right or position to hold her accountable. After a while, someone finally said, "As long as we can save the head of the family, we will do whatever it takes." The rest of the people chimed in and expressed their agreement. Jun Jiuqing's gaze swept across them before he looked at Chu Liyue again. "I can agree to your two conditions on behalf of Family Yi. Don't be in such a hurry. I'm not done yet." Chu Liyue interrupted Jun Jiuqing with a smile. "Thirdly, from now on, Family Yi must avoid anyone from the Yu residence if they encounter anyone from the Yu residence. If Family Yi uses today's incident as a reason to provoke the Yu residence in the future, I'll kill whoever comes. If two come, I'll kill both." She raised her chin as she spoke. "To prevent anyone from going back on their word, I'll have to trouble you to personally write a post as proof." Family Yi was stunned. They never expected Chu Liyue to make such a request. Jun Jiuqing reacted quickly. He pursed his lips and finally chose to agree. "Sure." Then he took out a pen and paper from his universe ring and began to write. Family Yi watched him write with complicated expressions. "Object? What about Yi Wentao? Agree?" This matter was truly too aggrieving. They had thought that they would return victorious today. Who would have thought that they would end up like this? This level of humiliation was akin to ceding territory as compensation. The atmosphere on Family Yi's side was oppressive and tense. Everyone's expression was extremely ugly. Today was a day of humiliation for the entire Yi family. Jun Jiuqing finished writing quickly and flicked his wrist. The piece of paper quickly flew toward Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue raised her hand to catch it and scrutinized it. Jun Jiuqing did not have any ulterior motives this time. He had written everything according to her instructions. Chu Liyue nodded in satisfaction. "Can you let her go now?" Jun Jiuqing asked. "Don't be hasty. There's still one last step." Chu Liyue smiled unhurriedly. "This piece of paper without a signature is useless." Jun Jiuqing frowned slightly. "I've already written my name on it." He was the young master of Family Yi. Moreover, with Yi Wentao's current state, he would probably give up the position of the family head soon. When that time came, Jun Jiuqing would directly take over the entire Family Yi. It would be the same if he was in charge. However, Chu Liyue wanted more than that. Whoever provoked today's matter will be responsible. As Chu Liyue spoke, she suddenly raised her hand. Something flew over from the side. It was an arm that had been cut off. Everyone present could see that it was Yi Wentao's arm. Just as everyone was shocked and confused, wondering what Chu Liyue's intentions were, they saw a light and shiny dagger suddenly appear in Chu Liyue's hand. Then she flicked her wrist and the dagger flew out quickly. A finger was silently cut off and flew towards Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue caught the severed finger and then printed a bright red fingerprint on the piece of paper. Then, she threw the severed finger aside and took out a white handkerchief to wipe her hand carefully. Then she burned the handkerchief. The whole process was smooth. It was as if it was not a severed arm or finger, but an unrelated object. Finally, she shook the contract and scrutinized it before nodding in satisfaction. It's done. As she spoke, she took a step back and bowed slightly with a smile. Family, thank you very much. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1974. Chu Luiyue was sincere. If it weren't for Yi Wentao, she wouldn't have had the chance to obtain so many treasures. This was a business that would definitely be profitable without any losses. Although it was a little torturous, but, to her and the entire Peach Blossom dock, the final outcome was extremely good. Yi Wentao glared at Chu Luiyue viciously, as if he wanted to skin her alive. He had heard and seen with his own eyes how he had lost so many items and was even humiliated. How could he bear this? Chu Luiyue had already retreated. Leave the divine artifacts behind. You can take the person away. These words were directed at Family Yi. Jun Jiuqing said. 30 venerable divine artifacts are too many. We can't gather them for the time being. After we go back, we'll gather them as soon as possible and send them over. Chu Luiyue suddenly stopped in her tracks and smiled. In that case, 3 days later you can bring the items to exchange for the person. Jun Jiuqing frowned slightly. But he knew Chu Luiyue too well. Since she had already said this, then no matter what others said, it was useless. He glanced at Yi Wentao. All right. As long as you can ensure the safety of the family head within these 3 days, we will naturally hand over the items. At this time they were no longer in the right to negotiate. They could only agree to whatever the other party said. Jun Jiuqing was very clear about this, so he didn't try to make any unnecessary struggles. Instead he agreed without hesitation. Chu Luiyue nodded. It's a deal. With that, she looked at Cini. Cini, bring Family Yi back and have a good rest. I'm sure Family Yi is very tired after today's incident. Cini's footsteps seemed light, but in fact he was extremely fast. In a short while he arrived beside Chu Luiyue and responded respectfully. Yes. Then he personally went forward. Seeing Cini's boots and gently swaying clothes, Yi Wentao's emotions surged. His blood rushed to his heart and he finally fainted completely. Cini's expression was still very calm. He went over and brought Yi Wentao back into the barrier. Family Yi's side was naturally filled with indignation and anger, but they had no other choice but to swallow all their emotions. Jun Jiuqing looked deeply at Chu Luiyue, then turned and left. Seeing him leave, the rest of the Family Yi followed one after another. If they didn't leave, they would stay here to be humiliated? Yi Wentau's teeth were itching with hate. He couldn't accept it no matter what. Things had actually turned out like this. Nan Suhui glanced at him and snorted. Stop looking, Yi Wentao. Es not you, estes, tease to be, teat, SSD. Wentao subconsciously stopped in his tracks. Betraying Lingxiao College will be the worst decision of your life. Every word of Nan Suhui's words fell clearly into Yi Wentao's ears. His heart suddenly thumped violently as if it was being pressed down by something. Yi Wentao closed his eyes and left. Family Yi left just like that. They were very fast. It wasn't clear if they wanted to go back and prepare the 30 venerable divine artifacts to rescue Yi Wentao as soon as possible, or if they wanted to leave this place that had humiliated them. The rest of the Nan family felt awkward. They came here to take revenge, but not only did they not succeed, they even lost their family head, Nan Yifan. From Chu Luiyue's attitude, it was clear that he wasn't willing to let them go. In the beginning, many people in the Nan family hoped to join forces with Family Yi to turn the tables. In the end, even Family Yi suffered heavy losses. Family Yi couldn't even take care of himself, let alone the Nan family Yi. If they continued to fight, they wouldn't be a match for so many venerable gods. Therefore the Nan family Yi was in a dilemma. They couldn't leave, but they couldn't stay either. After Family Yi left, Chu Luiyue focused on the Nan family Yi again. Unlike how he treated Family Yi, Chu Luiyue's attitude had changed a lot. Her gaze slowly swept across these people and then she said slowly, "You're right. Most of you have been deceived by Nan Yifan, which is why you have misunderstood my Peach Blossom Cove. Now if you want to leave, you can leave. If you don't want to leave and want to take revenge for Nan Yifan and the others, the Peach Blossom dock will accept it." She stretched out 3 fingers. "I'll count to 3. Those who want to leave, leave, and those who want to stay, stay. Once a decision is made, it can't be changed. As for which choice you should make, please consider it yourselves." Then she began to count down. 1. Everyone in the Nan family looked at each other. Chu Luiyue's meaning was very clear. Now the choice was in their hands to live or die. However, this decision was indeed difficult to make. 2. The Nan family members began to quietly retreat. It seemed that Nan Yifan wouldn't be able to survive, and it was very likely that he had done those things as Chu Luiyue said. Then why should they continue to stay for him? Once one person chose to leave, it would immediately lead the others to make the same choice. Soon most of the Nan family members chose to leave. Only Nan Hiqian was left standing there all alone. When he realized this, Nan Hiqian's expression changed. The Nan family's 1,000-year legacy can't be broken here. Before Nan Hiqian could finish, someone immediately rebutted him. Nan Hiqian's face turned pale. He knew that they were going to completely give up on Nan Yifan. They planned to go back and choose a new family head. 3. Chu Luiyue finished the last word. She looked at Nan Hiqian and tilted her head. Elder Nan Hiqian is really loyal. Is touching. Then, please? The battle in Peach Blossom Dock caused a huge commotion. In a short period of time, it quickly spread throughout the entire Divine Ruins world. Chu Luiyue was at the Upper God Realm and fought against the God Realm expert Yi Wentao and won. This shocking battle made Chu Luiyue famous again. Peach Blossom Dock's mansion also jumped out from the countless families and clans in the Divine Ruins world and became the most dazzling existence. Digression, I'll come back quietly at 7 o'clock. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1975. The Divine Ruins world was vast and there were many cultivators. All kinds of sects and clans appeared one after another. There were many people who wanted to have a foothold here. But most of them were washed away by the waves, leaving only sighs. Because it was simply too difficult. The overall situation of the Divine Ruins world had always been relatively stable. Those third-rate or even second-rate clans might be exterminated or replaced. However, the first-rate families had deep foundations and countless experts. It was very difficult to shake them. Almost no one dared to dream of breaking this situation. However, the appearance of Peach Blossom Dock's residents had finally caused a change in this situation. Who was Yi Wentao? Most people wouldn't know much about it. However, the people of the Divine Ruins world, who were truly powerful and had noble statuses, were all clearly aware of this. Even Yi Wentao had been defeated by Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue's strength was almost unimaginable. Not to mention that she was fighting above her level. Of course, many people did not believe this point. They would rather believe that Chu Luiyue had hidden her true cultivation level. But no matter what, she had defeated Yi Wentao at such a young age. This was truly shocking. This was something that could not be denied no matter what. At the same time, Yi Wentao's defeat was a wake-up call to those who had been tempted to make a move against Peach Blossom Dock. Family Yi was already like this, what about others? No matter how Chu Luiyue had done it, this was the truth. Obviously, Chu Luiyue had also killed the chicken to warn the monkey this time. Moreover, she had succeeded. After countless people heard this news, they all dispelled their thoughts about Peach Blossom Dock. More people began to be curious and gradually let go of the restrictions of the Yuntian Tower's princess consort. They began to examine and think about Chu Luiyue as an independent existence. What kind of heaven-defying existence was she? Since a long time ago, there had been many rumors about her in the Divine Ruins world. Everyone was surprised, shocked, and curious. Every time they thought that she had reached her limit, she would always do something even crazier and more shocking, announcing to everyone, she was stronger than they had expected. Now, she had finally occupied the Peach Blossom Dock and established the Yu residence. With an independent and powerful stance, she had officially entered the Divine Ruins world. The outside world was abuzz with rumors, but Peach Blossom Dock did not seem to be affected at all. After the battle ended, the city was filled with joy. Compared to the shock of Xuanhuan Jing and the others, the people in the city did not seem to be surprised by this result. They celebrated happily. In fact, by the time Chu Luiyue and his entourage returned to the Yu residence, a celebratory feast had already been prepared. After experiencing the shocking changes in the Peach Blossom Cove, Chu Luiyue had become a godlike figure in everyone's eyes. It was as if no matter what amazing things she had done, it was only natural. Xuanhuan Jing and the others followed Chu Luiyue all the way back to the Yu mansion. Only then did they realize that the Peach Blossom Cove was indeed Chu Luiyue's. The people here addressed her as Yu Zhu, with great reverence and admiration. One must know that the Peach Blossom Dock had always been filled with crooks and honest people. There was no lack of thorns and troublesome people. However, in front of Chu Luiyue, these people were all very obedient. Everyone could tell that she had absolute authority here. As long as she gave the order, these people would not hesitate to risk their lives and charge. This kind of cohesion was shocking. This question lingered in the minds of Xianxia, Zhao Song and the others. It was only until they heard about the things that happened in the Peach Blossom Dock that they finally understood. At the same time, they were even more shocked. The entire process was actually filled with danger. If there were any problems in the process, Chu Luiyue might have already lost her life. But fortunately, everything was in the past. Now, Chu Luiyue was the faith of everyone in the Peach Blossom Dock. Even though this place had just started to integrate, its future fighting strength might not be inferior to those first-rate families in the Divine Ruins world. Those who should be locked up were locked up and those who should be killed were killed. Chu Luiyue handed these matters over to Cin Yi. She had always been very assured when he did things. This celebratory banquet lasted until night time. Sanson even specially ordered people to prepare a grand firework to celebrate. Chu Luiyue did not care at first, but Sanson had always liked these things. Today he had vented his anger and achieved a great victory, so she simply let him be. In the black night sky, the dazzling fireworks bloomed like a moving picture. Chu Luiyue stood in the courtyard and looked up. In the depths of those black eyes, a brilliant light was reflected, sparkling brightly. She exhaled softly as her eyes flickered. In fact, even she did not expect things to progress so smoothly. "You are..." A familiar voice sounded. Chu Luiyue turned her head and smiled. "Taizu? Why are you here too?" The front courtyard was lively. After staying for a while, she said that she would come here to take a breather. She did not expect Taizu to be here too. Xianxia looked at her with emotion and relief. "I'm here because I have something to discuss with you." Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Taizu rarely showed such a cautious and serious look to her. It was as if he had made up his mind. Chapter 1976. The difference between the two was huge. A hint of surprise flashed across Chu Luiyue's calm eyes. "Stay in the Yu Mansion? Is this Senior Zhao Song and the others' idea?" Xianxia nodded. He knew that Chu Luiyue was very smart, so he said it directly. "Originally they wanted Zhao Song to come and tell you personally, but he felt that it was a little abrupt, so he asked me to pass the message." After all, this request was indeed surprising. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment. Seeing that she was deep in thought, Xianxia immediately said, "You can think about this matter yourself. Don't think about anything else. If you think it's inconvenient, I'll go and refuse them. Taizu, don't be anxious." Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh and quickly persuade him. "I don't think it's inconvenient, but I'm a little surprised. Besides, staying in the Yu Mansion it meant that these people would follow her in the future. Those people were all strong masters of the Supreme Realm. Senior Zhao Song and the others are all top masters of the world. I'm very happy that they have this idea. It's also because of this that this matter needs to be carefully considered." Xianxia couldn't help but laugh. "Girl, it's okay if others say this, but it's not appropriate for you to say it. Don't forget that even Yi Wentao was defeated by you. He's still locked up in the dungeon of the Yu Mansion." Chu Luiyue pursed her lips and smiled. "It's mainly because of the help of Dumpling and Zichen. Otherwise I wouldn't have won that match." Xianxia looked at her, his eyes clear and bright. It could be seen that she really thought so. Xianxia was secretly gratified and proud. Yu Er's temperament was indeed excellent. Not to mention a Supreme Realm Master like her, even a Supreme Realm Master could boast about defeating Yi Wentao. After winning, this child didn't become impetuous or complacent. It was really rare. This also made him more confident. This girl's future would definitely be limitless. But they are your contracted divine beasts, not anyone else's. Therefore in the end you've won this round. Xianxia stroked his beard. Actually, most of Zhao Song's group are rogue cultivators. Only a few of them are from aristocratic families. However, those were all small and insignificant families. In the Divine Ruins world, they were so insignificant that they could be ignored. If not for this, he really wouldn't have been able to invite these people to help. Some time ago, Chu Luiyue had sent him a message saying that she and Rongxiu had met with some trouble at Peach Blossom Dock. She hoped that he could invite some people to help. As a venerable blacksmith who had once been in the limelight, of course, he had a lot of connections and resources. Logically speaking, this was not difficult to do. But the key point was, what Chu Luiyue meant by a little trouble was that they were going to be attacked by Family Yi and the Nan family. In the entire Divine Ruins world, who had reached the God Realm did not know of these two great families. Because of this, Xianxia had been running around quite a bit. Only people like Zhao Song, who had an extremely good relationship with him and had nothing to worry about, had chosen to come along. They were all very clear that whether they fought or not, as long as they showed their faces, it meant that they were standing on the opposite side of family E and the Nan family. Most people would not dare to offend them like this. After all, before they came, no one knew that things would develop like this, right? Generally speaking, these people will not have any conflicts of interest with you. They can be completely trusted. Also, if they can stay in the U residence, it will be beneficial for you. Peach Blossom Dock had just been taken over by Chu Luiyue and the U residence had just been established. Everything was still in its initial stages. Although Chu Luiyue had won against Yi Wentao, if she wanted to completely strengthen the U residence in Peach Blossom Dock, it was obviously not enough to rely on her alone. Any strong sect needed a certain number of experts to support it. The appearance of Zhao Song and the others was undoubtedly the best way to solve this problem. In the entire Divine Ruins world, which family could produce so many venerable god experts in a single night? Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment, then nodded lightly. Then, please help me convey my gratitude to Senior Zhao Song and the others. I will visit them one by one tomorrow. This was a matter of great importance, so it was naturally best for her to appear personally. Xuanhuan Jing knew that she was cautious and meticulous, so he relaxed and laughed heartily. All right. In this battle, one side won and one lost. Some were happy while others were sad. Compared to the hustle and bustle in Peach Blossom Dock, no one in the faraway family E and the Nan family could sleep peacefully that night. Over at the Nan family, because Nan Yifan had become a captive and his son and daughter had died long ago, there was no hope for this bloodline. The remaining people all coveted the position of family head. Everyone was ready to make a move. Both openly and covertly, great waves were surging. No one cared about Nan Yifan's life or death anymore. The entire Nan family had descended into chaos. On the other side, family Yi's situation was not any better. It was early in the morning, the darkest time before dawn. In the hall, Jun Jiuqing sat in the main seat, while the remaining people were divided into two sides. The atmosphere in the entire room was cold and stagnant. Every inch of air seemed to be frozen, as if even breathing was a mistake. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. It was chilling. Jun Jiuqing raised his eyes and looked around. Everyone hurried back to family E and immediately came here. But after sitting down, no one spoke for a long time. In fact, they could not be blamed. Family E was used to living high and mighty. When had they ever suffered such humiliation? They were really dumbfounded. In fact, there were even some people that had yet to recover from the enormous shock that they had received. But Jun Jiuqing was not among these people. Knock knock. He knocked on the table. The crisp sound woke many people up. Everyone looked over. Jun Jiuqing said word by word. Family E suffered heavy losses in the Battle of Peach Blossom Dock. I understand the grief and anger in everyone's hearts. But now, the most important thing is to solve the problem in front of us as soon as possible and get out of this predicament. His words were unanimously agreed by everyone. Young master, what do you mean? What should we do now? Are we really going to send 30 venerable artifacts to Xuanhuan? Someone asked. It was painful no matter how he thought about it. Jun Jiuqing raised his eyes and glanced at that person indifferently. Why don't we let them continue to detain you and humiliate you as they wish? We'll never be able to lift our heads again. His tone was very calm, but there was a hint of coldness in it. That person's face alternated between green and white. He did not speak. The room fell into silence again. In fact, at this time they knew very well that the arrow was knocked on the bow and had to be fired. Jun Jiuqing raised his chin slightly. From today onwards, I will be the head of Family E. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1977. From now on, I'll be in charge of all matters concerning the Family E. Jun Jiuqing's words instantly caused an uproar among the crowd. Everyone was shocked and looked at each other in dismay. Jun Jiuqing was going to inherit the position of the family head at this time? Wasn't this too sudden? Young master, the succession of the position of the family head has always required the previous family head to personally confer it and hold a grand ceremony. Now that the family head is still trapped in the Peach Blossom Dock. It's a special time, so it's only natural that we have to do something special. Jun Jiuqing calmly interrupted the other party. His tone was firm. Now that the family E is in danger, the most important thing is to mobilize the entire family to save the family head. Another person couldn't help but say. But now that you're the young master and the family head isn't around, you have the same authority as the family head. Jun Jiuqing suddenly laughed. Oh, is it really the same? This rhetorical question left the other person speechless. The rest of the crowd fell silent. The young master and the family head had different statuses. Naturally, the authority in their hands was different. Even if Jun Jiuqing was the young master, he still had no authority over many people and matters in the family Yi. Only by becoming the family head could he have complete control over the family Yi. However, many people in the family Yi were unwilling to accept this. Even though Jun Jiuqing was the young master personally chosen by Yi Wentao. But his surname was Jun after all. Jun Jiuqing. How could such a person become the family head of the family Yi? The reason why the crowd didn't openly object before was mainly because this was the person chosen by Yi Wentao. They originally thought that they would make do with it until the right time to think of a way to pull Jun Jiuqing down. After all, there were some outstanding people among the younger generation of the family Yi. Why would they have to accept an outsider like Jun Jiuqing? Who would have thought that something would happen to Yi Wentao before that day even arrived? On the other hand, Jun Jiuqing was even more ruthless. At this time, he directly proposed to take over the position of the family head. I'm sure I don't need to tell you about the Yi family's current situation. Everyone should be well aware of it. Jun Jiuqing's voice was as casual as usual, but it carried a strong pressure that could not be disobeyed. As for the reason why everyone disagrees, I also understand it very well. But at this time, the family's interests were the most important. If anyone wants to disregard the lives of the family Yi and the hundreds and thousands of clansmen for their own selfish interests, then don't blame me for being impolite. With such a huge accusation, many people's faces paled. They wanted to say something but stopped. Listen to what he said. Those who didn't agree to his suggestion seemed to be betraying their families. But they couldn't find a reason to refute it. Jun Jiuqing's eyes scanned the crowd and finally curled up the corner of his mouth. Very good. Since everyone agrees, then, from today onwards I will be the new family head of family Yi. 2 days later, I will personally go to Peach Blossom Cove. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Chu Luiyue woke up. With a thought, she summoned the Sun Great Azure Axe. The huge black axe quietly floated in the air. It was covered with a thin layer of frost. This was the power that Zichen left behind to suppress the Sun Great Azure Axe. Because Chu Luiyue didn't have time to remove the connection between the Sun Great Azure Axe and Yi Wentao, she was worried that it would cause trouble, so she simply continued to use this power to suppress it. What are you looking at? Rong Xiao, who had just finished his morning exercise, walked in and saw Chu Luiyue staring at the Sun Great Azure Axe. Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and looked at him. Nothing. I just want to see what kind of treasures the 10 great sacred artifacts are. It was already very impressive for an ordinary noble family to have one sacred artifact, but she had several in her hands. Even she herself felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. Upon hearing this, Rong Xiao's scarlet lips curved up. He walked over and kissed her lightly on the lips. What do you think? His smile still carried a hint of nonchalance and carefreeness. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment as if she wanted to say something. Rong Xiao noticed and stared at her. Oh. His voice was low and pleasant, and he was very close to Chu Luiyue now. His warm breath landed on Chu Luiyue's face with a familiar cold fragrance. Chu Luiyue's face heated up. She coughed and pulled herself back from her thoughts. I think there's something wrong. Come and take a look. As she spoke, she summoned the heavenly square cauldron and the flowing cloud flying diagram. The 3 sacred artifacts floated side by side, emitting a faint pressure. Rong Xiao looked at them. You think there's something wrong with these things? Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment and nodded. These 3 sacred artifacts seem to... She paused and frowned as if she was considering how to speak. I think their auras are somewhat similar. She softened her voice and looked at Rong Xiao. What do you think? There was a moment of silence in the room. Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows. What do you mean? Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes dangerously. You're also a weapon refiner. Don't tell me you can't tell. Rong Xiao's skill in weapon refinement had always been above hers. If even she could sense it, then he must be able to sense it too. Rong Xiao couldn't help but laugh and then nodded. That's right. These 3 sacred artifacts are indeed somewhat similar in some ways. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Do you know why? She always felt that Rong Xiao seemed to have an extraordinary understanding of many things. So this time she still felt that he should know something. As expected, Rong Xiao nodded. He suddenly turned his head and looked at Chu Luiyue. A faint smile appeared on his noble and incomparable face. They were made by the same weapon refiner. Naturally, their auras are somewhat similar. For a moment, Chu Luiyue didn't even realize what he meant. After a while, she sucked in a breath of cold air. You mean these three were made by the same weapon refiner? Rong Xiu pondered for a moment. It should be, 5 of the 10 great sacred artifacts were made by the same person. Digression. 6 o'clock, mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1978. Chu Liwei was shocked at first, but then she asked subconsciously, who? Rong Xiu pondered for a moment and explained, rumor has it that he was a blacksmith from 10,000 years ago. He was extremely talented and powerful. People don't know his specific name, so they only call him Mr. Su. After leaving behind these 5 sacred artifacts, he disappeared without a trace. Chu Liwei suddenly thought of something and continued to ask, what about the remaining 5? Could it be? Rong Xiu looked at her with a smile. That's right. The remaining 5 were refined by another person. And this person was very famous. He was the top blacksmith in the Divine Ruins world at that time, Tang Ku. Chu Liwei had heard of this name before. In other words, almost all blacksmiths knew this person. Tang Ku was born in an ordinary clan, but he was extremely talented in blacksmithing. After he became famous, his entire clan became one of the most powerful clans at that time because of him. Unfortunately, there was one time when he was blacksmithing and he was careless and had an accident. After his death, the Tang family also quickly declined and was eventually annihilated. However, Chu Liwei didn't know that half of the 10 sacred artifacts were refined by Tang Ku. How do you know everything? Chu Liwei muttered and asked the question in her heart. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. This matter is recorded in Smelt. Among the blacksmiths, almost everyone knows about it. You only know about it now. Smelt was considered an introductory book for blacksmiths in the Divine Ruins world. It recorded some very basic blacksmith's content, as well as the deeds of many powerful blacksmiths. Any cultivator who wanted to become a blacksmith would study it carefully. However, Chu Liwei was an exception. She really hadn't read this book, because she only started to come into contact with blacksmiths after she went to Lingxiao College. At that time, the person who took her in was Rong Xiu. She was very talented and understood everything very quickly, so she directly skipped this most important part. So much so that even though she already had 3 saint artifacts in her possession, she still didn't know where they came from. Chu Liwei touched his nose awkwardly. Ahem, you didn't say anything back then? Rong Xiu had helped her pick out a lot of related books, most of which were quite profound. She was busy researching those things all day long, so she didn't pay much attention to it. Rong Xiu raised his hand. There was a gentle smile in his almond-shaped eyes. All right, it's all my husband's fault. Chu Liwei glared at him. Her watery eyes had a rare hint of innocence and charm. Rong Xiu's heart fluttered as he looked at her, and he pulled her into his embrace with his long arms. Actually, the 10 great sacred artifacts are indeed very interesting. At that time, Tang Ku was already famous. She was the most prestigious artificer in the entire Divine Ruins world. Countless cultivators paid him a visit and offered their best services, all for the sake of asking him to refine a suitable divine artifact. But Tang Ku's temper is very strange and she has very high requirements. Very few people can ask her to help. Chu Liwei nodded. The status of artificers was extremely high, not to mention that she was one of the best. It was normal for such a person to be arrogant because of her talent. Later, Mr. Su suddenly appeared out of nowhere and personally challenged Tang Ku to a competition to determine the winner. Rong Xiu held Chu Liu's slender white fingers and played with them. Tang Ku didn't want to pay attention to such a nameless junior, but probably because no one had challenged her for too long, she finally chose to accept the challenge. The two of them have been competing for a total of 3 years. Chu Liwei opened her eyes slightly. 3 years? Then the 10 saint artifacts. Rong Xiu smiled and nodded. The 10 saint artifacts were all refined in those 3 years. Chu Liwei sucked in a breath of cold air. In 3 years, the two of them had each refined 5 saint artifacts. How much patience and energy did they have to spend? A saint artifact was of a higher level than a venerable artifact. It was extremely precious and difficult to refine. Even someone as powerful as the great ancestor could only refine a venerable one divine weapon to this day. He once said that he hadn't even touched the threshold of a saint artifact. But Tang Ku and Mr. Su had not only refined it but more than one. The two of them were considered to be tied in this battle. And Mr. Su's reputation rose from then on. But this person was very mysterious. Almost no one knew his name and appearance. And not long after he disappeared. Half a year later, Tang Ku passed away. Chu Liwei was a little surprised. It sounded like the ending of the two of them was a little inexplicable. After Tang Ke's death, the Tang family was in chaos. Everyone eyed them covetously and attacked them in groups. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Very soon the Tang family declined. But the point was, the saint artifacts that everyone found in the Tang family were not 5, but 10. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Mr. Su's 5 saint artifacts are also, that's right. The 10 saint artifacts refined by the 2 of them were actually taken back by Tang Ke. It's just that no one knew about this matter. After the Tang family fell, the world knew about it. And in order to compete for the 10 saint artifacts, the families fought again. After a chaotic battle, some of the 10 saint artifacts were forcibly snatched and kept for themselves. Some were lost and their whereabouts were unknown since then. And because no one had successfully refined a new saint artifact from then on, those 10 saint artifacts were called the 10 great saint artifacts. So, the so-called ranking is also decided by the descendants? Rongxiu smiled and nodded. Actually, there's no ranking. Since they're all saint artifacts, there's not much difference between them. It's just that they specialize in different things. Moreover, an item of this grade would display different powers in different people's hands. Isn't that the same with your flowing cloud flying diagram? The Nan family carefully kept the flowing cloud flying diagram for so many years, but they never really understood it. On the contrary, Chu Luiyue became the new owner of the flowing cloud flying diagram as soon as he got it. It's not that the flowing cloud flying diagram's combat power is insufficient, it's just that the people of the Nan family didn't notice it. Who knew if the other saint artifacts were the same? Chu Luiyue looked at the 3 saint artifacts in front of him and narrowed his eyes. Then these three items were all made by Mr. Su. Rongxiu said. Although no one had personally witnessed the battle between Tang Ke and Mr. Su, the world still knew who had created those divine weapons. Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully. No wonder he felt that the aura on them was somewhat similar. It turned out that they really came from the same source. Knock knock. Just as Chu Luiyue was lost in thought, there was a sudden knock on the door. Your Highness, Princess, someone from the family Yi is here. It was Yan Qing's voice. Chu Luiyue stood up from Rongxiu's arms, put away the 3 saint artifacts and walked out of the door. Rongxiu also followed. Who's here? Chu Luiyue asked. Yan Qing's expression changed slightly and he bowed his head. Someone, the head of the family Yi, Jun Jiuqing. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1979. The head of the family Yi. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly and chewed on these words with interest. He's really fast. She had long expected that Jun Jiuqing would not sit still after returning, but she did not expect him to react so quickly. It had only been 3 days, but he had changed from the young master to the head of the family. His identity was actually a little sensitive in the family Yi. Chu Luiyue could tell that the people of the family Yi were not completely respectful and convinced of him. Under such circumstances, he must have used some tricks to become the head of the family so quickly. Rongxiu narrowed his eyes dangerously and smiled faintly. Yi Wentao is trapped in the peach blossom dock and his arms have been chopped off. He is no different from a disabled person. In addition, he lost miserably in the battle with you and lost face. Even if he could return to the family Yi, he obviously could not be the head of the family. The family Yi was like a dragon without a head, so it was a good time to take over. As the young master, Jun Jiuqing had the advantage. Moreover, he had Yi Wentao's endorsement. It was not difficult for him to win this round. Chu Luiyue turned to look at him and blinked. My husband. Huh? Do you smell vinegar? Chu Luiyue wrinkled her nose slightly and raised her hand to fan it. Where did it come from? Before she could finish her sentence, Rongxiu had already put his arm around her waist. I don't mind carrying you there. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed that if Chu Luiyue continued to speak, he really intended to carry her away. Chu Luiyue immediately shut her mouth obediently. She pursed her lips slightly and made a zipper over her mouth. According to her understanding of Rongxiu, he was really capable of doing such a thing. Rongxiu nodded with satisfaction, pulled her hand down and bent down to kiss her red lips. Then your husband will go with madam. When Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu arrived at the city gate again, Jun Jiuqing was already waiting outside the barrier for a while. Behind him were 2 elders. Compared to the previous battle formation, it was indeed much weaker. That's how it should be. They were the losers. Today they were the ones who brought the items to redeem their people. Naturally, they were inferior in terms of imposing manner. The 2 elders behind him had mixed feelings when they saw that the place had been cleaned up. If he hadn't personally experienced it, no one would have thought that an intense battle had broken out here 3 days ago. It was also here that Family Yi's reputation was swept to the ground and she was humiliated. When they thought about what they were here for today, the two of them felt even more awkward. Family Yi was used to being high and mighty, who could bear to fall after one move. However, Jun Jiuqing stood there with a calm expression. There was no sign of embarrassment on his face. Only when he saw Rong Xiao and Chu Luiwei holding hands and walking over together, a hint of emotion flashed across his eyes. Chu Luiwei looked him up and down. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Jun Jiuqing's aura seemed to be stronger than before. I haven't seen you for a few days, but I don't know how to address you? The current Jun Jiuqing was the head of Family Yi, but his surname was Jun. Jun Jiuqing's expression didn't change. It's just a surname. It's not very important. Master you can just call me Master Family Yi. He calmed himself down and continued, I'm sorry. Today I've come to keep the appointment. The 30 venerable divine artifacts are all here. As he spoke, he took off the interspatial ring in his hand and threw it over. Rong Xiao raised his chin. Yanqing. Yanqing immediately stepped forward and caught the interspatial ring. This interspatial ring was ownerless, so Yanqing easily counted the things inside. After confirming that there was no problem, she handed it over with both hands. Princess, 30 pieces, no more, no less. Chu Luiwei took the interspatial ring, quickly checked it, and nodded in satisfaction. Please invite the head of Family Yi. Oh no, the former head of Family Yi here. Digression, I'll be back at 7 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1980. Yi Wentao had been locked up in the dungeon for the past 3 days. He was a god after all, so his recovery ability was pretty good. Although he had lost both his arms, at least he was still alive. Of course, this was also at Chu Liu's behest. She was planning to sell Yi Wentao for a good price, so of course she had to take good care of him. Therefore, during this period, Yi Wentao was not deliberately mistreated. On the contrary, he was treated quite well. But now, Yi Wentao only felt that this was a mockery and humiliation to him. The 3 days were long and torturous. Each day felt like a year to him. When he was brought out and saw Chu Luiwei and Jun Jiuqing inside and outside the ward, the anger and resentment in his heart reached its peak. Chu Luiwei shook the interspatial ring and said with a smile, Yi Wentao, the Family Yi really treats you with sincerity. They said that there were 30 pieces and not a single one was missing. Moreover, all of them were of high grade. If I had to find a way to raise them myself, I don't know how much time and effort it would take. Thank you very much. Yi Wentao was filled with hatred, but he did not say anything. He just looked deeply at Chu Luiwei and closed his eyes. After a few days, he had become much more haggard. There were still mottled blood stains on his face and he looked very miserable. Anyone who saw him would find it hard to believe that this was the former high-spirited head of the Family Yi. Chu Luiwei lifted her chin slightly, and the two people behind Yi Wentao were about to escort Yi Wentao away. I can walk on my own. Yi Wentao finally opened his mouth and opened his eyes. Deep resentment flashed in his eyes. The two people looked at Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei nodded indifferently and said with a smile, if he wants to walk on his own, let him. After all, he's the previous head of Family Yi. We have to give him some face. Yi Wentao had just taken a step forward when he heard this. He stopped abruptly and looked at Chu Luiwei in disbelief. Previous patriarch? What was the meaning of this? The next moment he seemed to have realized something. He turned his neck stiffly and looked at Jun Jiuqing. He didn't need to ask to know what had happened. Jun Jiuqing actually took advantage of these few days to directly rise to the top? Yes, of course he would do that. This was the best time to begin with. Yi Wentao could not help but smile bitterly. What was he still dreaming about? Now that he had returned to Family Yi, it was impossible for him to be the same as before. And all of this was thanks to Chu Luiwei. Yi Wentao. Rong Xiao suddenly spoke and his voice was calm. I had always thought that you were a smart person. Yi Wentao's face was pale. Now he finally understood why Rong Xiao had not made a move. He had long expected this day to come. He did it on purpose. Yi Wentao's chest shook. He spat out a mouthful of blood and almost fell to the ground. Patriarch, Jun Jiuqing frowned. Yi Wentao laughed sarcastically. Yes, he was not dead yet. The Family Yi would still address him as patriarch. However, the way he addressed her as patriarch was completely different from before. He took a deep breath and forced down the thick taste of blood between his lips and teeth. He forced himself to continue walking forward. The surroundings were silent. Everyone's eyes were focused on Yi Wentao. Everyone had different thoughts. Yi Wentao felt as if there was a knife on his back. However, he knew that the more angry and resentful he was, the more he had to calm down. Step by step, he slowly and steadily walked to the edge of the barrier. Ripples spread out from the surface of the rock. An exit slowly appeared. Yi Wentao closed his eyes. Just a few days ago he was still thinking about how to break this barrier. He did not expect that in the blink of an eye, he would be reduced to such a state. He waved away all the messy thoughts in his mind and finally walked out. The two elders standing behind Jun Jiuqing immediately stepped forward to support him. However, Yi Wentao nailed them to the ground with a look. Although he was now the previous patriarch of the family Yi and was almost a cripple, he had been in this position for too long and had accumulated a lot of pressure. Even if he did not speak, his pressure was still there. Jun Jiuqing's eyes moved slightly and his voice turned cold. "What are you waiting for? Can't you see that the patriarch is seriously injured and needs help?" Although he was young, his words were dignified without being angry. They carried an awe-inspiring pressure that made people subconsciously obey. The two elders looked at each other and saw the difficult look in each other's eyes. This Yi Wentao clearly meant that he did not need anyone's help. Jun Jiuqing's words at this time, wasn't it obvious that he was deliberately going against him? Yi Wentao did not expect Jun Jiuqing to do this. He was shocked and angry. This kid. How could he be so scheming? On the surface, this was just a matter of words. However, in reality, it was a power struggle between the old and new patriarchs. The atmosphere froze for a moment. The two elders finally made up their minds and walked toward Yi Wentao. This choice was actually very easy to make. One was the new patriarch with top-notch talent and strength, while the other was the old patriarch who had become a cripple and had even caused the entire family Yi to suffer great humiliation. Who would rule the family Yi in the future? Wasn't it obvious at a glance? Yi Wentao's heart turned cold. He knew very well that if he did not have any other trump cards, he would be trampled under others' feet forever. Sometimes, falling from the clouds to the quagmire was just the price of making a wrong choice. Yi Wentao. Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her mouth and called out to him. Yi Wentao snapped out of his daze and turned his head to look at her. Chu Luiyue's lips curved slightly and her eyes curved. However, the corners of her eyes and the tips of her brows revealed a bone-chilling coldness. She said word by word, "I hate it when people rob me of my things." Everything that happened today was what he deserved. Yi Wentao's chest and abdomen seemed to be on fire, almost driving him crazy. He forced himself to retract his gaze. Now that he had fallen to such a state, there was no need to continue listening to these words. Besides, Chu Luiyue did not seem to care about his cold reaction and continued, "What you want to rob is clearly not Peach Blossom Cove, but you use this as an excuse to deceive the entire family Yi into paying for you. Yi Wentao, you really have a good plan." Yi Wentao's heart skipped a beat. His eyes were filled with disbelief. She knew? She knew. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1981. After Chu Luiyue finished speaking, everyone present turned to look at Yi Wentao. Especially the two elders standing beside him, their faces were filled with bewilderment and suspicion. Family Head was not here for Peach Blossom Dock? What else could he be here for? Was there anything more precious than Peach Blossom Dock here? However, at this point, Chu Luiyue did not seem to have any reason to lie. The two elders looked at each other suspiciously. If Yi Wentao had really sacrificed family Yi for his own personal gain, then, dead silence, the surrounding space became suffocating. For a moment, Yi Wentao was confused. He forcefully suppressed the urge to turn around and lowered his eyes slightly, hiding all the ripples in his eyes. After a while, he said coldly and hurriedly, "I don't know what you're talking about." After that, he continued walking forward, as if he did not want to pay attention to Chu Luiyue's nonsense. Chu Luiyue shrugged. "Family Yi, it doesn't matter if you know or not. Anyway, from now on, you just need to understand that you should never covet something that is not yours. Otherwise, next time, I can't guarantee that family Yi will not pay a greater price for your life." Every word of these two sentences was like a steel needle, piercing Yi Wentao's heart so hard that it was almost a bloody mess. He walked stiffly to Jun Jiuqing's side. The two of them looked at each other. Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he was thinking about something. Yi Wentao's heart skipped a beat. Did Jun Jiuqing believe Chu Luiyue's words? Just as his heart was filled with bewilderment, Jun Jiuqing laughed again. "It's great that Family Head can return safely. Let's go back now." As he spoke, his attitude was respectful and polite. It was as if the undercurrent was all an illusion. Yuantao's heart sank. Only then did he realize that Jun Jiuqing was more ambitious than he had expected. His means were also stronger. He had chosen Jun Jiuqing as the young master because there was no one in the family Yi's younger generation who could compare to Jun Jiuqing. On the other hand, Jun Jiuqing had always been polite and respectful in front of him. Therefore he was quite satisfied with Jun Jiuqing. In the end, he disregarded the family Yi's objections and gave him the position of young master. Who knew? That was all his disguise. Yuantao was certain that from the day Jun Jiuqing returned to family Yi, or even before that, he had been planning to rise to the top. However, it was already too late for him to understand this now. Yuantao could only hope that Chu Liuyue's words didn't make Jun Jiuqing suspicious. Even if he was suspicious, he didn't want to find out what was going on. He pretended to be calm and nodded. The group didn't say anything else and quickly left. After a while, their figures completely disappeared from sight. It seems that you're really sick of Yuantao. Rong Xiu suddenly spoke with a smile on his lips. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows. Why do you say that? Rong Xiu bent his finger and gently tapped her forehead. You know the answer. When Yuantao left just now, she didn't have to say those words. But she still said it. What? Of course, it was because she didn't want Yuantao to go back and live a good life. Sometimes, as long as a seed of doubt was planted, it could easily destroy everything. Yuantao was already in a difficult situation. If she added fuel to the fire, it was easy to imagine what kind of situation he would face when he went back. Chu Liyue blinked. You know me best, my husband. Yuantao was too greedy. He wanted the peach blossom dock and the armillary shield. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Everything that happened today was his own doing. This time I can finally have some peace and quiet for a while. Chu Liyue stretched herself. During this period of time, all kinds of things had happened. She hadn't had a good rest for a long time. Rong Xiu squeezed her hand, his eyes full of love. But he knew that these were all things that had to be done. How could it be so easy to have a place in the world of God? Moreover, if he interfered too much, it would inevitably make people think that she had relied on him and the Yuntian Tower to achieve what she had today. If that happened, it would undoubtedly erase her radiance. That wasn't the result that Rong Xiu wanted to see. Therefore, even if he wanted to intervene countless times, he still restrained himself in the end. Go back and have a good rest. Leave the rest to them. After this fierce battle, the Peach Blossom Dock indeed quickly regained its peace. Family Yi and the Nan family's crushing defeat made countless restless aristocratic families and clans give up. Chu Liyue left most of the aftermath to Cin Yi and Sanson. Sanson was very familiar with the Peach Blossom Dock, and Cin Yi was even more skilled and resourceful. With the two of them working together, they quickly cleaned up the mess. The people of the Nan family who had been detained before, including Nan Yifan, were all executed. Nan Yifan's head was even hung outside the city gates for 3 days and 3 nights. This was Chu Liuyue's warning to the entire world of God. Logically speaking, the Nan family should be furious with such humiliation. But at this time they didn't have the time to care about this. Because the entire Nan family had already sunk into an intense internal conflict. In addition, they had already lost several elders, and the family's strength had been greatly reduced. The current situation was one disaster after another. How could they care about anything else? 3 days later. In the room, Chu Liyue sat cross-legged. She swallowed a pill and closed her eyes. The origin power in her body kept surging out of her dantian and into her limbs and bones. After a long time, she opened her eyes and let out a long breath. I've finally fully recovered, she muttered softly. Actually, the battle between her and Yuantao wasn't as simple as it seemed. Yuantao was a god after all. Even though she had Ziqin and Dumpling's help, she still suffered some internal injuries during the battle. Fortunately, it wasn't serious. Now that she had cultivated a divine body, her recovery was stronger than before. After a few days of recuperation, she was finally fully recovered. She stood up and planned to go out for a walk. The moment she opened the door, she saw Cin Yi walking over. Master. Cin Yi stepped forward and bowed. Chu Liyue looked at him in surprise. Cin Yi? Why are you here? He should be at the Door Realm now. In the past, Peach Blossom Cove was a mixed bag of good and bad people. The Door Realm could be entered and exited as one pleased. After the Black Sword Sect's people came, they occupied and controlled the Door Realm. Ever since the Black Sword Sect's army was wiped out, Chu Liyue transferred a group of people from the Yu residence to guard the Door Realm. Now that Peach Blossom Cove was on the right track, Chu Liwei started to consider increasing the defenses of the Door Realm. Xin Yi had received orders to investigate in the morning. She didn't expect him to return at noon. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1982. Xin Yi bowed slightly. Master, the situation in the Gate Realm is a little special. I'm afraid you'll have to go there personally. Chu Liwei was stunned. Special situation? Wasn't it just a Gate Realm? What could be special about it? But seeing Xin Yi's serious expression, Chu Liwei nodded. Okay. The reason why he sent Xin Yi was because he was proficient in all kinds of formations and mechanisms. Chu Liwei originally wanted to ask Xin Yi to build a second layer of defense in addition to the normal defenses. He didn't expect that after just one morning, he would say that the situation was a little special. Chu Liwei knew Xin Yi's personality best. If he said that, then he must have really encountered some kind of trouble. I'll go with you. The two of them had just walked out of the Yu residence when they bumped into two people. The person in front was wearing a colorful dress. Her body was slim and exquisite, and her slender and fair wrists were jingling with jade fragments. It was little Hachi. Master. Seeing Chu Liwei, little Hachi's eyes lit up, and she immediately went up to him. Master, little Hachi missed you so much. Her voice was soft and charming, and her beautiful eyes blinked lightly. They were so lively that they seemed to be able to drip water. If it wasn't for her big brother standing beside her, she would have clung to Chu Liwei directly. Chu Liwei's mouth twitched. They had clearly not seen each other for 2 or 3 days. Those who didn't know better would think that they had been separated for 800 years. Besides, the reason why they didn't meet was because little Hachi had been busy catching up on sleep and taking care of herself. Some time ago, little Hachi and Shifang had been handling those medicinal herbs day and night in various parts of Peach Blossom Cove. They almost didn't sleep at all, and it was very tiring. Although this wasn't considered much for ordinary cultivators, it was different for little Hachi. She had always been delicate and valued her appearance. She would break down if she slept until there was a mark on her face, let alone staying up in the wind and sun every day. He heard that she had been fiddling with a lot of things to apply to her face and take a bath. You're finally willing to come out today? Chu Liwei teased. Little Hachi pursed her red lips. It's all because I've been through too much trouble recently. I've become haggard. Master, take a look. How do I look? Chu Liwei scrutinized her small face and nodded affirmatively. Her beauty is unparalleled. Little Hachi was satisfied. Seeing that she was happy, Chu Liwei looked at the young man who came with her. She had noticed this person just now. His appearance was ordinary and his figure was thin, but somehow he was somewhat familiar. Little Hachi smiled and winked. Could it be that Master couldn't recognize him? Chu Liwei looked at it carefully again. Lin Qifei. The young man suddenly raised his hand and took off a thin mask from his face. A familiar face appeared in front of Chu Liwei. Her eyebrows were bright and clear, indifferent and cold. Her clear and shallow eyes were suffused with a faint light. It was Lin Qifei. Greetings, Princess. Lin Qifei stepped forward and saluted with a fist salute. It's really you? Chu Liwei couldn't help but laugh. No wonder she found him familiar. Why are you here? Of course I brought you in. Before Lin Qifei could explain, little Hachi spoke first with a smile. Originally, I thought that after staying in the house for a few days, I would come out for a walk to get some fresh air. I heard that someone was outside the city gate, so I went to take a look. It was an acquaintance, so I brought you here. At this time, almost no one came to Peach Blossom Cove. Therefore, when someone suddenly came alone, the people in charge of guarding the city gate were naturally very vigilant. Lin Qifei didn't hide his identity, but the city gate was heavily guarded, so naturally they had to check carefully. In the end, little Hachi happened to go over and helped Lin Qifei out by bringing him here. Speaking of which, Lin Qifei and she were not familiar with each other. But she knew that Lin Qifei was working for Chu Liwei, so naturally she treated him as one of her own. As for that face, Little 8 had relied purely on the aura on his body to identify him. She had always been good at this, so recognizing a person was nothing to her. Lin Qifei bowed. I heard that Princess had won a great victory in Peach Blossom Cove, so I came specially. What happened a while ago had already spread throughout the entire world of God. Of course, Lin Qifei had also heard about it. Chu Liwei's smile deepened. I originally said that I would let you come over after everything was settled here. I didn't expect you to act so quickly. In fact, Chu Liwei had her own considerations. Lin Qifei's identity was somewhat special. The Lin family was one of the 28 branches of the Yuntian Tower. Logically speaking, Lin Qifei was a member of the Yuntian Tower. Although he had started to follow Chu Luiyue before, at that time Chu Luiyue was still the princess of the Yuntian Tower. But now it was different. In addition to her identity as the princess, Chu Luiyue was also the lord of Peach Blossom Cove. His coming to Peach Blossom Cove meant that he had completely defected to Chu Luiyue. Although Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu were already husband and wife, Peach Blossom Cove and the Yuntian Tower were ultimately independent of each other. Lin Qifei's actions. Clearly he had already made his decision. Chu Luiyue paused for a moment and waved his hand. You came at the right time. Come with me to the Gate Realm to take a look. He was also extremely talented in this area. Perhaps he could really come in handy. Lin Qifei acknowledged respectfully. Chu Luiyue then looked at Little Hachi. Little Hachi, do you want to come with us? Little Hachi wanted to refuse, but on second thought, there was nothing to do when she went back. She had gone through so much trouble to recover her complexion and had even put on exquisite makeup. How could she go back just like that? That would be such a waste. Therefore, after much consideration, Little Hachi decided to go. When she smiled, her eyes were charming, but the temperament between her eyebrows revealed a hint of innocence. When the two different kinds of beauty were mixed together, it was especially captivating. She was indeed a natural beauty. She walked leisurely to Lin Qifei's side. After all, I was the one who brought Mr. Lin in. Naturally, it's best to accompany him. Occasionally, when she was in a good mood, she liked to make such jokes and tease people. Chu Luiyue knew her best. He did not mind and nodded. Okay, then we... Yanqing? When did you come back? Digression, 6 o'clock mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Although he was a man of few words and had a cold personality, he had always been very smart. Otherwise, Rong Xiu wouldn't have placed him in such an important position. Chu Luiyue rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. In the end, he decided to throw this matter to the back of his mind. He didn't care about them anymore. Although Little Hachi was occasionally a little spoiled and willful, she always knew her limits. Even if she had some conflict with Yanqing, according to Yanqing's ice-cold personality, after dealing with it for a while, Little Hachi would probably feel that it was meaningless and leave it unsettled. Let's go and take a look at the door world. Chu Luiyue walked forward. Sun Yi and Lin Qifei followed closely behind. Little Hachi, on the other hand, stood where she was, seemingly in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking. After Chu Luiyue walked some distance, he realized that she wasn't following him. He turned around and called out to her. Little Hachi? Little Hachi came back to her senses. Ichim? Oh, I'm coming. As she spoke, she quickly walked over. But this time she didn't stand by Lin Qifei's side. Instead, she obediently followed behind Sun Yi. Chu Luiyue looked at her thoughtfully. After a while, he put away his thoughts and turned to walk in the direction of the door world. On the other side, Yanqing returned to the Yu residence. His footsteps were calm, and his handsome and cold face was expressionless as usual. Only his eyes seemed to have a slight ripple in them. Yanqing? Yanqing. A familiar voice rang out. Yanqing raised his head. Yuemo had appeared in front of him without him noticing. At this moment, he was looking at him with a puzzled expression and waving his hand in front of his eyes. What are you thinking about? You're so engrossed. Yuemo had come with the soldiers of Yuntian Tower a few days ago. However, he had always kept a low profile and didn't appear in front of others. Even in the Yu residence, many people didn't know of Yuemo's existence. Most of the time he was only responsible for reporting the news outside to his master, and then passing down the orders. Because some of these things were rather secretive, he had also deliberately reduced his presence. However, this was the inner courtyard and this was Yanqing's residence. Normal people wouldn't come here. That was why Yuemo came out directly. Yanqing took a step and went around him. Nothing. His personality had always been cold. He might not even answer 3 questions. Yuemo was already used to it. However, his state was really a little strange. The two of them had been colleagues for many years and knew each other very well. Yuemo was sure that something must have happened to Yanqing. He quickly followed him. Didn't you go to send someone off today? Could it be that something is not going well? Yanqing looked at him indifferently and didn't say anything. However, his meaning was very obvious. Yuemo scratched his head. He also felt that this guess was too ridiculous. Those who went to send off were Yuntian Tower's own people. Yanqing's status was noble, so those people didn't dare to act rashly. Then, there didn't seem to be any other reason? Ever since the princess consort won the battle with Yi Wentao, the atmosphere in Peach Blossom Dock became very lively and cheerful. The unity of the people in the city and their belief in her was beyond imagination. Everything in Peach Blossom Dock was developing in a better direction without them interfering. The princess consort was in a good mood, so was His Highness. He was even more amiable to them. What was there to worry about on such a good day? Yanqing walked to the stone bench in the courtyard and sat down. His eyes were slightly lowered as if he was thinking about something. Yuemo followed him and poured himself a cup of tea. We're all brothers. If you have any difficulties, just tell me. There's no need to be polite between us. This sentence seemed to have convinced Yanqing. His heart moved slightly, and he looked up at Yuemo. Yuemo was drinking tea. The fragrance of the tea was rich and refreshing. Yanqing was Rongxiu's confidant and was treated very well in the Yu residence. Sanson specially ordered people to send him many good things. Yuemo was sighing with emotion when he heard Yanqing suddenly say, "Do you think young Master Lin is good-looking?" Yuemo spat out the tea in his mouth. In an instant, the tea stains splashed all over his body. However, he couldn't care less at this time. He widened his eyes and looked at Yanqing in horror. What did you say? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1984. Yanqing seemed to be deep in thought. I heard that fourth young Master Lin was liked by many girls at Heavenly Cave Cliff. However, his marriage was delayed because of his weak body. Although these matters were fragmented, the information that Yanqing had in his hands was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to stay by Rongxiu's side for so long and deal with everything neatly. Yuemo spat out the tea leaves in his mouth with difficulty. You said Lin Qifei? Fourth young Master Lin of Heavenly Cave Cliff was Lin Qifei. But the point was, why did Yanqing suddenly mention him and ask if he was good-looking? Yuemo looked at him as if he had seen a ghost. What does it have to do with you whether he's good-looking or not? No, Yanqing, are you okay? This wasn't the Yanqing he knew at all. This guy usually didn't even care if a woman was good-looking or not, but now he was asking a man. Yuemo's eyes gradually turned from shock and confusion to horror. Wait. You can't be. He suddenly thought of something and threw the teacup in his hand away. He covered his chest with his hands and was nervous and on the verge of breaking down. Damn it. Could it be that Yanqing has always liked men? We used to live and eat together for many years. Yuemo felt like he was going crazy at the thought of this. Yanqing frowned, and the disdain on his face was overwhelming. Even if I really like men, you're not worthy of it. Yuemo was speechless. So, he misunderstood? But why did this sound so awkward? Seeing Yanqing's eyes, Yuemo realized what he was doing and felt embarrassed. Ahem. It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. He let go of his hand and touched his nose awkwardly. I'm doing this out of concern for my brother. Yanqing frowned even harder, and a rare look of annoyance flashed in his eyes. He must be confused to ask Yuemo this question. Who knew how far that brain of his could go? Thinking of this, he felt inexplicably frustrated, so he stood up and left. Why are you leaving? He hadn't finished speaking yet. Seeing that Yanqing was about to leave, he hurriedly followed her, but he didn't dare to get too close. I'm sorry, okay? Tell me about it. Bang. Yanqing walked into the room and closed the door, cutting off the noise. Hiss. Yuemo sucked in a breath of cold air and covered his nose. So painful. This brat really didn't hold back. Moreover, why was he so irritable today? Who provoked him? Yuemo felt wronged, but he wasn't angry. There was something wrong with Yanqing's behavior. Perhaps, should he investigate from other aspects? Chu Luiyue and the others were extremely fast. After about an hour, they arrived at the gate of the Peach Blossom Cove. From afar, a huge curtain of light fell from the sky. A powerful and vast pressure faintly spread from it. This was the gate, and also the existence that connected the outside world of the divine ruins. When the guards of the Yu residents who had been guarding here saw Chu Luiyue and the others arrive, they all bowed. Greetings, Master Yu. Chu Luiyue nodded, indicating that they didn't need to be so polite. These people were all personally selected by Sanson, and they were all trustworthy. She sized up the gate for a while but didn't find anything unusual. Sin-Yi, you said that the situation here is special. What's going on? Sin-Yi walked forward for a distance and was only a step away from the gate. It was within reach. Master, come over and take a look. Chu Luiyue walked over with doubts in her heart. It wasn't until she stood in this position that she finally saw what was wrong with the gate. The power fluctuations of this gate didn't seem normal. Chu Luiyue stretched out her hand. Just as her slender fingers touched the faintly shining curtain of light, ripples spread out. A dangerous aura suddenly swept out from the curtain of light. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled, and a reddish-gold flame quickly surged out. But in the next moment, that ball of flame seemed to be pulled into the curtain of light by an invisible hand. Boom! Sparks flew everywhere. Master, be careful. Xin Yi seemed to have expected this, and he directly took action, setting up a green barrier in front of Chu Luiyue. Fine sparks splashed onto the barrier, producing ear-piercing sizzling sounds before they were quickly extinguished. And at this moment, that ball of flame had completely disappeared. Only the ripples were left on the curtain of light. Chu Luiyue held her breath. At this moment, she realized that these ripples had gathered together to form a whirlpool. This whirlpool was extremely shallow, and it was almost impossible to see it from the front. If it hadn't swallowed that ball of flame just now, Chu Luiyue wouldn't have noticed it either. Soon, the whirlpool gradually calmed down, and it returned to its original calm state. It was as if everything just now was just an illusion. Chu Luiyue frowned. This gate realm was indeed different from ordinary gate realms. Inside, it contained an extremely dangerous power. Chu Luiyue didn't doubt that if someone passed by now, their ending would be exactly the same as that ball of flame that had been swallowed. At that time, it would be hard to say whether they would live or die. Such a gate realm was extremely dangerous and it couldn't function normally at all. No wonder Xin Yi insisted on inviting her over to take a look personally. This gate realm, when did it become like this? Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at the few people in charge of guarding it. The person in front hurriedly said, in reply to Master Yu, this situation didn't happen suddenly. Ever since the people of Black Sword Sect were all killed, we came here to replace them. On the first day this gate realm was still fine, but as time passed it gradually changed. Until yesterday, it was completely impossible to enter or leave. Originally we wanted to report it today, but Lord Xin Yi happened to be here, so they couldn't be blamed for not discovering it in time. During this period of time, the entire Peach Blossom Dock was under martial law, and no one was allowed to enter or leave as they pleased. The gate realm was also completely sealed off. They were only in charge of guarding it, and this change happened silently. There were almost no flaws on the surface, so it was normal that they only found out now. Chu Luiyue looked at Xin Yi. What do you think? Xin Yi paused for a moment. I guess that perhaps this is caused by an external force. It was just a few words, but they contained a lot of information. Because this wasn't an ordinary barrier, but a gate realm. This light screen was naturally formed and had existed for 10,000 years. Who could have such a powerful force to affect it to such an extent? Suddenly a voice sounded. There's a Xian formation hidden in this gate realm. Chu Luiyue turned and saw that Lin Qifei had also walked over at some point. He was standing in front of the gate realm and staring at it. Her heart skipped a beat. Why do you say that? Digression. The 5th update is at 6:30 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1985. Lin Qifei pursed his lips. I have a feeling. He couldn't produce any evidence yet, but he just had this feeling. It was subtle but also very clear. Chu Luiyue followed his gaze. At this moment, the ripples on the door realm had completely calmed down. Seeing that Chu Luiyue didn't say anything, Lin Qifei thought she didn't believe him and continued. I've entered the door realm many times, so I have some understanding of it. This door realm is indeed different from ordinary door realms, and this difference is very likely caused by Xian formations. You've broken through to the Great Xian realm? Chu Luiyue suddenly asked. Lin Qifei was startled, and a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. Seeing his reaction, Chu Luiyue immediately confirmed her guess. As expected, when did this happen? Everyone turned to look at them. Lin Qifei was only in his early 20s and looked very young. In addition, he had been ill for many years and his body was weak and thin, making him look like a frail scholar. Now, Chu Luiyue actually said he was a great Xian realm master. How could this not shock everyone? Even Xin Yi was a little surprised and he stared at Lin Qifei. Although he knew that Lin Qifei was very talented in this area, he didn't expect him to break through again in such a short time. 10 days ago. Lin Qifei said honestly. Actually, at that time he had already heard some news about Peach Blossom Dock and wanted to come directly, but he happened to be on the verge of a breakthrough, so he delayed it for a while. Although he knew that this side didn't lack his combat strength, he still had the intention. Chu Liwei exhaled softly, looking at Lin Qifei with undisguised admiration. She had long known that Lin Qifei was shockingly talented in this area, and he wasn't inferior to her at all. Lin Qifei could recognize this largely because he knew more about the Door realm than Chu Liwei. But at the same time, his terrifyingly sharp senses were of great help. You said that there is a Xian formation inside, then? Can you find out what kind of Xian formation it is? Lin Qifei shook his head. I can't tell for now. He could feel the existence of a profound formation, but he was unable to make a more detailed judgment based on this feeling alone. This was within Chu Liu's expectations, so she wasn't disappointed and just nodded. It's okay. Since they had already found some clues, there was definitely still hope. She looked at the gate realm in front of her again and narrowed her eyes. Xian formation. Naturally, such a thing wouldn't appear in the gate realm out of nowhere. But who could it be? Family. The news of Yi Wentao's return spread like wildfire. However, no one was able to see him. This was because Yi Wentao had returned to his residence as soon as he returned. He only told the others that he needed to rest for a period of time. During this time he would not meet with anyone. Actually, this was easy to understand. Everyone in the family Yi had seen how badly he had been injured that day. Moreover, after this battle, his face could be considered to have been completely lost. He could no longer raise his head in front of the family Yi. It was not hard to imagine that facing anyone in the family Yi at this time would be a great torture for him. Of course, Yi Wentao's residence had been changed. After all, he was no longer the family head. Jun Jiuqing had specially arranged for an extremely remote corner for him. To Yi Wentao this was humiliating but also the best choice. Because this way he could really avoid meeting the family Yi, and he wouldn't have to care about the various gazes. Jun Jiuqing only asked the two elders who had returned with him to guard him. No one in the family Yi had expected that Yi Wentao, who had been in high spirits not long ago, would return to the family Yi in such a situation. Dusk fell and the moon was in the middle of the sky. Yi Wentao lay alone on the bed. The bitter smell of medicine filled the room. On the table next to him was a wooden box. A pill lay quietly in it. The medicinal fragrance was emitted from it. Jun Jiuqing had specially left it for him to heal his injuries. But after Yi Wentao returned, he lay in bed from day to night without taking the pill. He opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling. He seemed to be looking at the patterns on the ceiling, but also seemed to be lost in thought, looking through them to see something else. Family head. Suddenly, a series of familiar footsteps came from outside the door, followed by the elder's respectful salute. Yi Wentao did not move. Naturally, he was not addressed as family head. I'll go in and take a look. Jun Jiuqing's voice was cold and indifferent. You can leave first. The two elders took turns to be on duty, so there was only one person outside the door. His words were not to be questioned. The elder quickly replied. Yes. Soon Jun Jiuqing pushed the door open and entered. Yi Wentao closed his eyes. Jun Jiuqing glanced at him, turned around, locked the door, and set up a barrier to ensure that their voices would not be heard. Only then did he speak. Have you thought it through? Yi Wentao did not speak. Obviously he did not want to pay attention to him. Jun Jiuqing was not in a hurry. He walked to the side of the bed not far away. He tilted his head and carefully looked at Yi Wentao for a while. Suddenly he curved his lips without a smile. It seems that you are quite confident in yourself and think that you can fight back? Family head, I have always respected you, but I did not expect that you would still be so naive. He gently knocked on the table. You know the origin of that shield, right? Or should I ask, when did you come into contact with that person from Black Demon Cave? Yi Wentao suddenly opened his eyes. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1986. Yi Wentao's eyes were filled with shock. He wanted to deny it, but when he looked up, he met Jun Jiuqing's gaze that was full of scrutiny, as if he had seen through everything. This made Yi Wentao's heart slowly turn cold. I really underestimated you. To be able to ask such a question, it was enough to show that Jun Jiuqing knew much more than he thought. He didn't see it at all before this. If he had known, he would have been on guard against him. Patriarch, you flatter me. I was just casually guessing. As for the truth, it's better for you to tell me personally. As Jun Jiuqing spoke, he directly sat down beside him. It seemed that if Yi Wentao didn't give him a satisfactory answer today, he wouldn't leave. Patriarch, you've done your best for family Yi for so many years, but in the end, you've fallen into such a situation. Even I feel sorry for you. Jun Jiuqing's words were like sharp blades, ruthlessly stabbing into Yi Wentao's heart. Just tell me what you want and I'll get it for you. What do you think? Yi Wentao sneered in his heart. That was a nice way to put it. Jun Jiuqing was just doing it for himself. The room fell into a dead silence. Yi Wentao didn't say a word and Jun Jiuqing didn't say anything either. The two of them faced each other silently. In the dark night, this kind of silence was almost suffocating. After an unknown period of time, Yi Wentao finally closed his eyes. She's holding the armillary shield. Jun Jiuqing looked up and there seemed to be a glimmer in his eyes. Armillary shield? He had heard of all the famous divine weapons in the divine ruins, but he had never heard of this before. However, if it could make Yi Wentao go to such lengths, it must be an extremely precious item. According to Chu Luiyue, Yi Wentao seemed to be doing it for Peach Blossom Cove, but in reality he was after the armillary shield. If that's the case then, what kind of existence was this armillary shield? How could it attract Yi Wentao more than the Peach Blossom Dock? I wonder what kind of treasure the armillary heaven's shield is for the patriarch to yearn for it so much? Jun Jiuqing asked. Yi Wentao suddenly laughed and turned to look at Jun Jiuqing. His scarlet eyes flickered with a bloodthirsty glimmer in the dark night, making people shudder. Then, his low and hoarse voice rang out in the room. I don't know about the rest, but once I have the armillary heaven shield, I have a high chance of becoming a god. His voice was very low, as if it would disappear in the wind at any moment. However, Jun Jiuqing heard it clearly. His brows furrowed. There were beings of a higher level than Her Eminence. However, in the Divine Ruins world, it had already been 10,000 years since anyone had broken through this shackle. All the cultivators were trapped in the Her Eminence realm. No matter how hard they cultivated, they could not advance to the next level. But now, Yi Wentao actually said, with the armillary heaven shield he could become a god? No wonder he cared so much. There were millions of cultivators in the world. Who didn't want to become stronger? It was even more so for a top god like Yi Wentao. He had seen too many things in the secular world and he didn't care at all. The only thing that could make him crazy was this. If this news was known to others, it would probably cause a huge storm. But, who could be sure about this kind of thing? Could he just rely on a shield to cut the rope that had bound him for 10,000 years? Jun Jiuqing remained doubtful. But he didn't completely deny this possibility. There was no smoke without fire. Yi Wentao was willing to make such a big move, which proved that he had a certain basis. Otherwise, according to his cautious personality, he wouldn't act so rashly. Yi Wentao looked at Jun Jiuqing's changing expression and laughed softly. Ha, you say, who wouldn't want such a thing? Nan Yifan doesn't know about this. Jun Jiuqing interrupted him and said lightly. This was not a question but a statement of certainty. Yi Wentao wasn't surprised that he could guess. After all, the series of events in the Nan family during this period was enough to explain everything. If Nan Yifan knew this, he wouldn't have taken such a risk. Then, the news about the armillary heaven shield, did the patriarch hear it from the Black Demon Cave? Jun Jiuqing suddenly thought of something. He raised his eyes and stared at him. Yi Wentao took a deep breath. That's right. That's strange. How could the one in the Black Demon Cave be willing to tell the patriarch of the Black Demon Cave such important information? He seems to need this more, right? Jun Jiuqing asked with interest. You know a lot. Yi Wentao looked at him meaningfully, but he wasn't shocked. Ever since Jun Jiuqing asked that question, he knew that Jun Jiuqing knew a lot. Of course, I didn't get this news for free. I got it in exchange. Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes. The patriarch is so capable to get such news. I wonder, what did you exchange for it? Yi Wentao sneered. How do you think he escaped from Rongxiu a few years ago? Peach Blossom Dock, you mention. There were a few peach trees in the courtyard. Under the peach trees there was a green rattan chair. At this moment a person was half lying on it. A breeze blew and the pink and white peach blossoms fell, making the person's clothes look whiter than snow. His eyes were closed and his facial features were clear and handsome. He was perfect. From afar, he looked as if the heavens had used the best jade to carve him. He didn't look like a human being. When Yuemo walked in he saw such a scene. He had been with Rongxiu for many years, and he was already used to His Highness's peerless appearance. But when he looked at him again, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. If Yanqing was really gay, then he should like His Highness, right? Is there a man in this world who is more good-looking than His Highness? No, His Highness can no longer be described as good-looking. He simply, just as Yuemo was letting his imagination run wild, Rongxiu opened his eyes. He looked over and happened to see Umo staring at him with a thoughtful expression, and the look in his eyes was even more. Rongxiu narrowed his eyes. Umo suddenly felt a chill. He finally came back to his senses and looked over. He met His Highness's eyes. He immediately shuddered. It's so cold. His Highness's eyes are so scary. He originally wanted to run away, but his strong desire to live ultimately urged Umo forward. Your Highness, the matter you asked me to investigate has been found. Rongxiu sat up. Speak. Umo's expression was solemn as he bowed. Your guess is correct. A few years ago, there were indeed a portion of those who fought against you who were not from the Black Demon Cave. He paused for a moment, then continued. 3 of them were from Family E. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1987. These men are Yi Wentao's men of sacrifice and they only obey him. Even many people in the family you don't know about their existence. Therefore, most people in the family you don't know about what happened back then. 3 men. Although it didn't sound like a lot, they were all very powerful. Otherwise, Rongxiu wouldn't have specially sent him to investigate this matter. In the years since then, Yi Wentao has been very cautious and hasn't summoned any of his men of sacrifice. That's why we haven't been able to find out that Family E is behind this. Until this time, when Yi Wentao was seriously injured and Jun Jiuqing took over the position of family head, he finally made a move. We followed the vine to the melon and found out about this. Although Umo was usually lively and liked to joke, he was very reliable when it came to serious matters. Rongxiu had handed this matter to him a few years ago. In between he had tried countless methods but to no avail. However, he didn't give up. When he found out that Family E had come to Peach Blossom Dock, he quickly sent more men to continue the investigation. Now there was finally a result. Rongxiu nodded. His thin lips curled slightly but there was no surprise in his eyes. He had indeed guessed this possibility long ago. At that time he had chosen to go to Black Demon Cave only after he had a precise understanding of their strength. However, when he arrived he found that the actual situation was somewhat different from what he had expected. Although it didn't have much of an impact on the final result, but Rongxiu had put this matter on his tab. In the world of divine ruins, there are very few people who have this ability. It wasn't hard to guess, but the key was to find evidence. Rongxiu smiled faintly. There seemed to be a thin layer of coldness between his brows. Yi Wentao was also a strong-willed man. Ever since then, he hadn't had the slightest contact with his men of sacrifice for such a long time. He had even cut off all contact with those who weren't sent to Black Demon Cave. It wasn't easy to nurture these people. The fact that he was willing to spend so much on them showed how tempting it was. Yi Wentao knew that Rongxiu would inevitably suspect him, so he had been very careful with his words and actions. If it wasn't for the fact that he was forced into a corner and had no other choice, he probably wouldn't have used this trump card. It seems that his life and family isn't too good. As Rongxiu spoke, he suddenly recalled how Chu Luiwei raised his eyebrows and smiled. He couldn't help but smile. Speaking of which, I still have to thank you for this matter. If she hadn't given Yi Wentao a few fierce medicine in succession and completely stunned him, things wouldn't have progressed so smoothly. Then, what do you mean? Let's just wait and see. Rongxiu lay back on the rattan chair and waved his hand casually, as if he did not care about these things at all. Umo was a little surprised. After all, this investigation had been going on for several years. He thought that His Highness would definitely counterattack after getting the evidence. Let Family E deal with it themselves. Rongxiu said lightly. Jun Jiuqing and Yi Wentao, there was still a fight. Umo's eyes lit up. He immediately understood something. Your Highness is wise. Seeing that Rongxiu seemed to be planning to rest, Umo wanted to take his leave. However, he suddenly recalled Yanqing's strange behavior and hesitated. Just say what you want to say. Rongxiu saw through his thoughts. Umo scratched his head in embarrassment. Your Highness, it's actually nothing. It's just that. I feel that Yanqing has been acting a little strange recently. Did he suffer a blow during this period? Rongxiu's lips curved up into a light smile. Don't worry. That's what he deserves, Yi Zichen said. Digression. I'll be back at 6. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1988. As soon as he finished speaking, a familiar sound of footsteps came from outside. Rongxiu's eyebrows moved slightly, and an exquisite and slender figure came into view. It was Chu Luiyue. Yuemo turned around and bowed. "Greetings, Your Highness." Chu Luiyue had her head slightly lowered as if thinking about something, but when she heard the voice, she looked up. Rong Xiao had already gotten up and walked over. "What are you thinking about? Why are you so lost in thought?" As he spoke, he glanced at her hand and saw a faint red mark, as if something had pressed down hard on it. There was a trace of dark red blood that was about to seep out. He frowned slightly. "What's wrong?" Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and shook her head. "It's nothing. It's just a small injury." To her, it was not even an injury. Rong Xiao put his fingers on her wrist and checked it. After confirming that she had indeed only suffered a small flesh injury and was not seriously injured, his expression eased a little. But in the end his heart still ached. He pulled Chu Luiyue to the rattan chair and let her sit down. He took out the medicine, gently applied it on her hand and carefully massaged it. The faint smell of medicine was mixed with a trace of peach blossom fragrance. A cold feeling came from her hand, and the burning pain from before was instantly reduced by a lot. Chu Luiyue did not care about these injuries at first, but when she saw Rong Xiao slightly lowering his head to apply medicine for her, she felt very relieved. She originally wanted to do it herself, but after thinking about it, she let Rong Xiao do it. "Your Highness, Your Highness, Your Highness, I will take my leave first." Yuemo was already used to this kind of scene. Rong Xiao responded and let him go. Soon, only the two of them were left in the courtyard. Chu Luiyue tilted her head slightly and stared at Rong Xiao for a while. His expression was very serious and his movements were very gentle. In the Divine Ruins world, Rong Xiao's name was illustrious. Many people trembled with fear and reverence when they heard his name. Even Nan Yifan and Yi Wentao did not dare to offend him. However, such a person was by her side now. Just because her hand was injured, he patiently and meticulously applied medicine for her. It seemed like there was nothing more important than this in the world. There seemed to be waves surging in her heart. Finally, she couldn't help but stand up and kiss him lightly on the cheek. "My husband is the best." Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, he quickly retreated. Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. "Don't think that you won't be able to explain yourself just because of this." Ever since Chu Luiyue had broken through to the divine body level, she had rarely been injured. It was obviously not normal to leave such a mark on her hand. Moreover, they were in Peach Blossom Dock, her own territory. Chu Luiyue exhaled and lay back in the recliner. "It's all because of that gate realm." Rong Xiao paused. "Very troublesome?" Actually, he had already guessed that it had something to do with the gate realm in Peach Blossom Dock. He knew that Chu Luiyue, Tsin Yi, and the others had gone to the gate realm together. However, he didn't expect her to be injured. Chu Luiyue nodded. "I don't know who hid a Xian formation in the gate realm. Moreover, that Xian formation is extremely powerful. It has already affected the entire gate realm. Now it's impossible to enter and exit the gate realm normally." She shrugged. She was both angry and amused. "There's no need to send someone to guard it. Even a high god expert might not be able to escape safely." As she spoke, she raised her hand. "Yes, this hand is injured because of this." After hearing Lin Qifei's guess, she felt that it made sense. In order to figure out what was going on, she decided to try it herself. However, just as her hand reached into the gate realm, an extremely powerful force seemed to surge from the surroundings. She had a bad feeling and immediately withdrew her hand without hesitation. Even so, she was still injured. Fortunately, I dodged quickly. Otherwise... Rong Xiao's brows furrowed slightly. After all, although Chu Luiyue was only a high god, she had already tempered her divine body through the god-destroying tribulation. With her current divine body, she could even fight against a venerable god. Wasn't Yi Wentao the best example? It seemed that the gate realm had indeed become extremely dangerous. Rong Xiao pondered for a moment. "I'll go with you tomorrow?" Chu Luiyue nodded. A few petals drifted down. Chu Luiyue looked up. The peach blossoms on the tree were in full bloom. Suddenly, something landed between her brows. It was cold. Chu Luiyue was stunned. "It's snowing?" Rong Xiao looked up at the sky as well. The originally azure sky had unknowingly turned into a dark, leaden gray. Sparkling and translucent snowflakes were slowly drifting down. He retracted his gaze and bent down to pick her up. The snow in Peach Blossom Cove came very suddenly. However, for the people who had stayed in Peach Blossom Cove for a long time, this was not a surprise. For many years, the weather in Peach Blossom Cove had been very changeable. Most people were already used to it. In the corridor in front of the door, Sanson was leisurely walking forward with his hands in his hands. As he walked, he was humming a little tune. His small eyes narrowed with a smile as if he was in a good mood. Yujio and Shifang happened to bump into him. From afar, they saw Sanson's happy expression. Yujio and Shifang greeted him. "Third brother, what happened? Why are you so happy?" Sanson said with a smile. "Nothing, nothing." Yujio and Shifang looked at each other. There was only one explanation for him to be so happy. "Looks like third brother made a fortune again?" Yujio teased. Sanson put his hands in his hands and smiled brightly. "What? Wasn't it all thanks to Master? I was just about to report the good news to Master." Shifang suddenly thought of something. "Looks like someone has already started to contact third brother?" Sanson raised his finger and blinked. "Sure, this matter isn't completely settled yet. It's not too late to be happy after Master makes the decision." Although he said that, the smile on his face was already overflowing. After saying that, he hurriedly bid farewell to the two of them and headed inside. Yujio held her sword with both hands and looked back and forth between Sanson and Shifang. "Shifang, you seem to know something?" Shifang didn't care much. "Actually, it's not a big deal. It's just that third brother plans to open his business outside." Yujio immediately understood. So he wanted to expand his business. If he did this, it meant that there would be greater profits. No wonder he was so happy. It's normal for third brother to do this. But, open it outside? Where are you referring to? Shifang looked at him suspiciously. How would I know? Yujio, I knew that I couldn't be referring to him. When Sanson arrived at the inner courtyard, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu were sitting under the eaves and admiring the snow. "Master, your highness." Sanson tried his best to control the expression on his face before stepping forward. Chu Luiyue turned to look at him and raised his eyebrows. "It seems that a lot of people have contacted you recently?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1989. The smile on Sanson's face immediately widened. Master is really wise. You guessed right. Ever since I spread the news 3 days ago that I intend to sell the herbs and elixirs of the Peach Blossom Cove, I have received news from many aristocratic families. Look, I have already compiled a list of names. Take a look. As he spoke, he presented a piece of paper with both hands. Chu Luiyue took it. On the paper there was a list of names. Most of them were famous aristocratic families in the world of God. Chu Luiyue was quite familiar with some of them. Sanson rubbed his hands, unable to hide his excitement and eagerness. "Master, ever since you defeated Yi Wentao, the Yu residence of the Peach Blossom Cove has become famous. Now, there are many people in the world of God who want to build a good relationship with us." It was not an exaggeration to say that they were trying to curry favor. Everyone in the world of God knew what kind of treasure the Peach Blossom Cove was. Now that this place belonged to Chu Luiyue, they could only settle for the second best. Even if they could not occupy the Peach Blossom Cove, it would be the same if they could obtain the resources of the Peach Blossom Cove. The Peach Blossom Cove was rich with energy from heaven and earth, and there were all kinds of heavenly treasures growing there. Many of them were extremely difficult to find in the entire world of God. Although Sanson had only opened a few shops in the Peach Blossom Cove before, he was actually very famous. Occasionally, there would be some people who came here to buy all kinds of precious herbs and elixirs from him. Ever since Sanson sent out the news, many aristocratic families had expressed their goodwill. On one hand, the things in the Peach Blossom Cove were indeed of high quality. On the other hand, this could be considered as building a relationship with Chu Luiyue. Killing two birds with one stone, why not? Sanson could almost imagine the scene. Anyway, the Peach Blossom Cove had an almost inexhaustible supply of heavenly treasures in his small space. Hence, it would not affect anything if he took out some of them. Others did not know, but he and his master were very clear about this. In the past, because he was oppressed by the people of the Black Sword sect, he had always been very careful. Now he could finally let go. "Master, take a look at this list. Is there anything you want to change?" Chu Luiyue looked up and down a few times. "Meteor sect and these sects." As she spoke, she pointed from above. Sanson leaned over to take a look and quickly memorized it. "Apart from these 4, the rest have all been rejected," Chu Luiyue said indifferently. Sanson was waiting happily, but when she heard this, she was stunned. You only chose 4? Reject the rest?" There were more than 10 clans listed here. Master hadn't even reached a third of it. Chu Luiyue nodded and handed the paper over. Sanson was very puzzled and stared at the list of names on the paper for a long time. Master, isn't this too little? As for the rest, some of them have big families and businesses. They're pretty good. Chu Liwei raised his eyebrows. You should go and ask them. How could they have the nerve to write to me after offending me? Among them there were quite a few who had conflicts with her in the past. Sanson was stunned. Only then did he remember that his master had been attacked by many clans in the world of divine ruins. He suddenly patted his head and was very annoyed. How could he forget about this? Master, please calm down. It's all my fault. Sanson was very embarrassed. Chu Liwei looked at him with a smile. All right, I know you didn't do it on purpose. Actually, not all of these clans have dealings with me. However, this is just the beginning. If I choose too many clans at once, it will only attract extra attention. Although 4 clans wasn't a small number, it was still feasible as long as the quantity was controlled. In the world of divine ruins, there were many clans that didn't have enough medicinal herbs and elixirs. Many of them had to be bought from outside. However, there had never been a clan that could provide for 4 clans at once. It was appropriate to let people have some guesses so that they wouldn't dare to look down on Peach Blossom Dock. There was no need to do anything more. Sanson suddenly understood and nodded repeatedly. You're right. Then I'll go and reply to these clans. He wiped the sweat off his forehead. Master was so thoughtful. Chu Liwei nodded. Go. She was at ease with Sanson's work. Sanson then said goodbye and turned to leave. It seems that you already have a lot of plans. Rongxiu walked over and hugged her waist, resting his chin gently on her shoulder. Chu Liwei nodded. It's always good to have more friends. After all, she didn't know when the people of Black Demon Cave would make a move. In fact, the people of Black Demon Cave had already suffered several losses at her hands. Especially when Black Sword Sect was completely wiped out. They had suffered heavy losses. No one would be able to tolerate it. However, until now Black Demon Cave hadn't made any moves. Rongxiu's lips curled slightly. Don't worry, Mo Shiqian isn't someone who is willing to suffer in silence. Chu Liwei turned around and asked with interest. It sounds like you know him quite well? Although she had dealings with him before, that person had always been hiding behind the black fog or the mirror. She had never seen his true appearance. Rongxiu pondered for a moment. You'll get to know him sooner or later. Chu Liwei was deep in thought. At this moment, the sound of wind suddenly came from the sky. Chu Liwei seemed to have sensed something and looked up. A muscular snow-white figure quickly pounced over. Chu Liwei was delighted. Shua. Hearing her voice and seeing her face, Shua, who had been running around for a long time, suddenly became excited and wanted to pounce on her. In the end, before it could reach him, a cold gaze fell on it. Shua froze and quickly braked. In the end, it stopped in the courtyard. At this moment, there was already a thick layer of snow on the ground. It stood there almost blending into the snow. Only its ice-blue eyes became clearer and brighter. Chu Liwei waved at it. Shua, come here. Speaking of which, she hadn't seen it for a long time. Hearing this, Shua jumped up and came to Chu Liwei and Rongxiu. It first shook off the snow on its body from a distance before walking forward. Chu Liwei patted its head. Shua narrowed its eyes in satisfaction and made a gulu sound from its throat. As for its master's gaze, it had completely ignored it. Didn't you hear that my dear Yuer took the initiative to ask it to come over? Where have you been all this time? Chu Liwei asked with a smile. Shua thought for a moment, rolled on the ground and raised its claws. Only then did Chu Liwei see that the pads of its claws were still stained with a few coarse grains of sand. She was slightly stunned. You went to the Red Moon Desert? Digression. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1990. Shua got up and glanced at her mistress with resentment. It's been so hard on me. Chu Liwei looked at Rongxiu. Rongxiu's expression was gentle. I haven't been back for a while, so I wanted to let Shua take a look at the situation in the Red Moon Desert. Chu Liwei was relieved. That made sense. Ever since Lingxiao College went through a calamity, De Bao had never appeared again. Until now there had been no news. She had wanted to go and take a look, but unfortunately she hadn't had the time. It was indeed quite appropriate to let Shua go. Thinking of this, she looked at Shua. Shua, how's the situation over there? A trace of seriousness flashed across Shua's eyes, and then it shook its head. Chu Liwei's heart sank. This means? It said that during this period of time the seniors haven't come out. Rong Xiu explained. Chu Luiyue frowned even more. Not even on the day of the Red Moon Desert? Shui shook its head. It had stayed there for a long time, but it didn't notice anything. In fact, during the entire process, those few people didn't even pay attention to it. According to its previous experience, those few people would definitely react if they knew that it had gone over. It felt that something was wrong, so it rushed back. This was the first time it had returned from the Red Moon Desert so cleanly. Chu Luiyue frowned and fell into deep thought. They must have encountered some trouble in the Red Moon Desert. Then, when you were there, did you encounter any suspicious people or things? Shui thought for a moment and shook its head. It was as if nothing had happened there and it hadn't met anyone. In short, it was like a normal deserted desert. But this was not normal. Chu Luiyue felt uneasy. Putting Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Shao aside, De Bao already had a divine body and could freely travel to and from the divine ruins. He hadn't appeared for such a long time. I'll accompany you to take a look at the situation in the Gate Realm tomorrow. Rong Xiu raised his hand and gently smoothed out the faint traces between her eyebrows. If it's convenient, I'll make a trip to the Red Moon Desert. In any case, they had to enter and exit from the Gate Realm. This was perfect. Chu Luiyue felt a little relieved and nodded. All right. Chu Luiyue almost didn't sleep that night. All sorts of images flashed through her mind. Most of them were related to De Bao and the rest. The moonlight was like water flowing in through the window. Chu Luiyue lay on his side on the bed and finally opened his eyes. Rong Xiu approached her from behind and pulled her into his arms. Chu Luiyue instantly fell into his warm embrace. Thinking about the past? Rong Xiu's voice was especially low. Chu Luiyue nodded. Yes. After pausing for a moment, she said, at that time I was able to break through the Gate Realm and come to Peach Blossom Dock with the help of De Bao and the rest. Speaking of which, it was also a coincidence that she met De Bao and the rest. Back then, when Mu Qinghe led the army to conquer De Huang Swamp, she secretly followed the army. There was one time when she ran into trouble. In a hurry, she entered De Huang Swamp and got lost with the others. Later, she met De Bao and the rest. She had learned a lot from them. Even though she had never formally acknowledged them as her master, in her heart, she had always regarded the three of them as her masters. Especially De Bao. He was the strictest to her, but he also taught her the most. It was also their existence that let her know that there was a place like the Divine Ruins realm other than the Tianling dynasty. In the blink of an eye, so much time had passed. Actually, there's something that I've always been puzzled about. Chu Luiyue turned around and placed her hands on his chest. She looked up slightly and said softly, De Bao and the rest were imprisoned in the Red Moon Desert. But you also know how strong they are. In this world, who is it that has such ability? She had always been very curious about this matter, but she had never asked. She could feel that De Bao and the rest did not want to tell her so much. Even the fact that De Bao was unwilling to make a move in the Divine Ruins realm seemed to be related to this. Somehow she felt that something bad had happened this time. Rong Xiu hugged her even tighter and kissed her forehead. Don't worry, seniors will be safe. Chu Luiyue gently closed her eyes. Definitely. The next morning, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu went to the Gate Realm together. Lin Qifei and Sun Yi accompanied them. Little Hachi did not seem to be interested in these things, so she did not come this time. After yesterday's investigation, Chu Luiyue sent Wu Yao and Yu Jiu to guard here. The moment they arrived, Chu Luiyue clearly sensed that the Gate Realm had changed compared to the day before. The pressure from above was even stronger than before. The aura it emitted was also more dangerous. This change was actually very subtle. If Chu Luiyue had not been here yesterday and personally investigated it, it would have been very difficult to detect it. This was also why the people in charge of guarding here had only noticed something was wrong so late. Chu Luiyue walked to the Gate Realm. The energy fluctuations above have become more dangerous. Rong Xiu walked forward and held her hand, making her step back while he stood in front. He stared at the Gate Realm for a while, then reached out his hand. Buzz. His fingertips had just touched the light screen when there was a sound. Chu Luiyue's heart seemed to have been grabbed by something. Be careful. Rong Xiu nodded, then continued to probe inside. Soon half of his palm was submerged in the light screen. A biting cold aura instantly surged from all directions. It seemed to want to crush his hand. Rong Xiu's gaze sharpened, and a ball of golden flames erupted from his palm. Boom! Intense energy collided with each other. Shortly after, a crack suddenly appeared on the Gate Realm. Chu Luiyue thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her at first glance. However, she saw a second crack appear right after. The faint cracking sound seemed to come from a distant space. Her pupils contracted. Only then did she see clearly that there seemed to be something hidden within the gate realm that was suffused with a faint glow. That was a mirror. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 1991. The light screen of the gate realm was clearly just a thin layer. However, at this moment, the light rippled as if it was bottomless. The mirror seemed to slowly float up from a clear lake. It gradually approached and reflected a figure. Chu Luiyue looked over. A tall figure appeared in the mirror. It was Rong Xiu, but it didn't look like him. Because the person in the mirror, although his appearance and figure were exactly the same as Rong Xiu's, was wearing a black robe. It was clearly the same facial features, but it had a completely different expression and temperament. It was cold and disdainful. With just one look, the invisible pressure seemed to be suffocating. Chu Luiyue was stunned. She felt that it was a little unfamiliar, but there was also an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Crash! The huge mirror shattered with a loud bang. The figure inside also dissipated. Chu Luiyue subconsciously looked at Rong Xiu. He must have seen the scene just now. However, Rong Xiu's expression was calm and grave. The side of his face was handsome and perfect, with smooth lines. There was no change in his expression at all. It was as if he didn't see the scene just now. Or, did he see it but didn't care? Chu Luiyue was about to ask in detail when she suddenly felt a strong force sweeping over from the gate realm. Rong Xiu knitted his brows and pulled her into his arms. Then the two of them fell into a thick darkness. Master. Your Highness. Xin Yi and Lin Qifei's voices sounded, but they seemed to be very far away. In the boundless darkness, Chu Luiyue could only hear the whistling of the wind, which constantly blew past her ears. Around them, wild energy intertwined and killed each other. It wrapped around the two of them and carried them in an unknown direction. This process didn't last long. Moreover, Chu Luiyue was held tightly in Rong Xiu's arms. With him protecting her, she wasn't injured. After about an hour, a bright ray of light finally tore through the thick darkness. An intense and dazzling light surged from the front. Chu Luiyue turned her face slightly and narrowed her eyes. Rong Xiu hugged her with one hand and covered her eyes with the other. The two of them landed. Chu Luiyue's feet stepped on the sturdy ground, and the floating feeling in her heart finally dissipated a little. At this moment, her eyes had adjusted to the surrounding light. She held Rong Xiu's hand and looked up at the surroundings. When she saw the surroundings, she was first stunned, then she frowned slightly. In front of her was a simple and grand city. Outside the tall and majestic city gate, there was an endless stream of people coming and going. It looked very lively. Behind him was an undulating mountain range and a lush forest. To Chu Luiyue, this was a completely foreign place. This is... Chu Luiyue Rong's frown deepened. How did they end up here after crossing the gate realm? The power in the gate realm is rioting, causing the void to tremble. It's very likely that we were sent here in the chaos. Rong Xiu looked around and quickly took in everything here as he said calmly. Chu Luiyue nodded. This was the most reasonable explanation. However, Xin Yi and Lin Qifei don't seem to have followed us. She had already checked just now. There was indeed no aura of the two of them around. But thinking about it carefully, this was actually normal. After all, the accident happened too suddenly. At that time, she was still thinking about Rong Xiu's figure in the mirror and couldn't react for a moment. If not for Rong Xiu's quick reaction, she would have been separated from Rong Xiu by now. Since we're here, let's take things as they come. Let's go into the city and take a look. Rong Xiu said. Chu Luiyue exhaled softly and nodded in agreement. They had to know where they were before deciding what to do next. She was about to walk forward when Rong Xiu suddenly pulled her back. Don't move. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue was stunned. Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. Are you really going to go over like this? Chu Luiyue came to a realization. Their current appearance was indeed a little eye-catching. There were many unknowns ahead, so it was better to be cautious. 15 minutes later, the two of them finished disguising themselves and completely changed their appearances. Their appearances were ordinary and their clothes were ordinary. At a glance, they were unremarkable. Fortunately, the two of them were at the edge of the forest and almost no one passed by them. Therefore, their actions were very concealed. After confirming that everything was ready, the two of them looked at each other and walked towards the city gate hand in hand. The closer they got, the more people there were around them and the more lively the atmosphere became. As Chu Luiyue walked, she quietly looked around and realized that most people were heading towards the city. Moreover, they were all very young. Most of them were in their teens and 20s, and only a few looked to be around 30 years old. Moreover, these people's faces were full of undisguised anticipation and excitement. It was as if there was something full of temptation waiting for them in the city. Chu Luiyue vaguely felt that this scene was a little familiar. Doesn't it look like Fang State City? Rong Xiu's voice suddenly fell into her ears. Chu Luiyue looked up and the two of them looked at each other. She suddenly understood. That's right. It did look a little similar to Fang State City. In Fangzhou City there were also many youthful faces full of vigor. But that was because Fang State City was next to Lingxiao College. Those people were so excited because they looked forward to Lingxiao College. And now, a city that did not seem to have anything special about it, why was it also like this? These people seemed to be quite talented. Chapter 1992. The young man had a strong build, dark skin and a chiseled face. He looked very straightforward. Rong Xiu smiled. We are indeed new here, so there are many things we don't know. I wonder if this brother can help me clear up my doubts? Although he had put on a complete disguise and looked ordinary, and his noble aura was almost completely concealed, when he spoke, he was polite and courteous, neither servile nor overbearing. It was very easy for people to have a good impression of him. We don't have that much time. A young woman behind the young man suddenly said. She was quite beautiful. She was dressed in luxurious clothes and exquisite makeup, and her eyebrows and eyes were like a painting. At this moment, she looked at Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue with undisguised impatience. Brother, let's hurry up and enter the city. It won't be good if we're late. She walked to the young man's side and hugged his arm coquettishly. The black-faced young man looked a little hesitant. They were indeed a little late. If they were delayed any longer, seeing this, Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and chuckled. It seems that you are in a hurry. We won't disturb you. With that, he turned around and was about to leave. Hey! The black-faced young man hurriedly called out to Rong Xiu. Brother, please don't mind her. My sister has always been outspoken and has no ill intentions. Since we've met, it's fate. Why don't we go together and talk about it on the way? He had a feeling that although the two in front of him looked very ordinary, there was a hint of nobility in their movements. It seemed that they were not ordinary. Most importantly, he couldn't see their strength. The people who came to Yun State could be said to be hidden dragons and crouching tigers. It was better to make friends than to make enemies. As soon as he said that, the woman behind him and the others were a little puzzled. Why did brother seem to be so generous to these two? But since he said so, they naturally couldn't refute. Rong Xiu looked at Chu Luiyue. Madam, Chu Luiyue smiled slightly. I'll listen to my husband. Rong Xiu nodded. Then I'll have to trouble you all. There was no one guarding the city gate, so everyone could enter and leave as they pleased. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu also entered Cloud State City with this group of people. The roads in the city extended in all directions, and it was bustling with activity. Walking among them, they were not eye-catching at all. Both sides exchanged greetings and introduced themselves. The black-faced youth was called Hiziji, and the people behind him were his relatives and friends. They had come to the Cloud State to participate in the trial. Trial? Hearing this, Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. The Cloud State didn't look very big, but it was able to attract so many young cultivation geniuses to come here for the trial. Obviously there was something fishy going on. Yeah. This was already the third trial held in the Cloud State. I heard that this trial will last for a month, and it will officially begin tomorrow. If he was a day later, he wouldn't be able to make it in time. If you miss it, you'll have to wait for another half a year. Hiziji explained. This trial, is it very important? Rong Xiu asked back. Hiziji looked at him in surprise, as if it was very abnormal that Rong Xiu didn't know anything about this. Of course. Hiziji emphasized. If you can pass the trial, you will be qualified to enter the Gate Realm. Enter the Divine Ruins world to cultivate. Countless cultivators in the world are scrambling for it. As he said that, he lowered his voice. Do you know the Empress of the Tianling dynasty? She entered the Divine Ruins world from here. Cough cough. Chu Luiyue coughed violently. Digression, Aunt Meng is still sleeping? I'll come back at 6 o'clock. I was wrong. My computer is broken. I used my cell phone to send it, but it automatically canceled the section. I owe you an update. I'll start updating tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1993. There was no one else who could eat melons on their own heads. Hiziji and the others looked at her in confusion. Chu Luiyue waved her hand. Cough, it's nothing. I just suddenly choked. However, where did you guys get this news? Why didn't she know that she had used this method to enter the Divine Ruins world? You guys don't know about this? Hiziji and the others' gazes became even stranger. Hizailan curled her lips slightly and said disdainfully, Big brother, only the people with status in the few great dynasties know about this. Who knows where they came from? It's normal that they don't know. Chu Luiyue, even though she had always been sharp-tongued, she couldn't think of anything to refute this time. She touched her nose and ignored her man's somewhat mocking gaze. We have naturally heard of the name of the Tianling dynasty's princess. Rong Xiu didn't seem to care about Hizailan's words and chuckled softly. But we have always lived in seclusion before, so we have never heard of this matter. Hiziji frowned and looked at his sister with a warning look. It was indeed a bit too much to say such words in front of others. Fortunately, the other party didn't seem to mind. Hizailan snorted softly, but didn't dare to be presumptuous again. Hiziji pondered for a moment. It seemed that these two people really didn't know anything. He asked tentatively. Then, do you two know about the Divine Ruins world? Rong Xiu nodded. Hiziji heaved a sigh of relief. Knowing this, it wasn't difficult to explain. It's a long story. More than a year ago, the Tianling dynasty's princess, Xuanhuan, broke through the Door realm and entered the Divine Ruins world. Moreover, it was said that she was still doing well in the Divine Ruins world and was famous. Everyone yearned for it, so naturally they all wanted to imitate her. However, how could it be so easy to enter the Divine Ruins world? Many people begged for it, but there was no way in. It was only when the trial in the Cloud State began that they were given a rare opportunity. It was said that breaking through to the High God realm was a piece of cake in the Divine Ruins world. Therefore, everyone was rushing to Yunzhou. Tomorrow was the day of the third trial. Therefore, the entire Yunzhou city was bustling with activity. This explanation was easy to understand. However, Chu Luiyue still frowned. Because there was a crucial problem in all of this. How did the news of her going to the Divine Ruins world get out? She did not deliberately publicize this matter, so there were not many people outside the Divine Ruins who knew about it. How did it spread to such an extent that it was causing such an uproar? There were even rumors that she was doing extremely well in the Divine Ruins world. Someone was deliberately leaking this information. But, what was the purpose? If she had not come here today, she would not have known that such a situation had occurred outside the Divine Ruins world. It was clear that the enemy's primary target was not her, but cultivators like Hiziji and the others. Chu Luiyue looked around and asked in a seemingly casual manner. Since they're all here for cultivation, why are all the young cultivators here? Why aren't there anyone else? Hiziji laughed heartily. Naturally, it's because only cultivators under the age of 35 can participate in the trial. Furthermore, the younger one was, the better one's talent was, and the better one's results would be in the trial. This rule is a little strange. Chu Luiyue thought to herself. Generally speaking, only when the academy recruited students or the sect selected disciples would there be a limit to the age of the cultivators. She did not know what kind of situation this trial was. There was actually such a rule. It's also because of this that many young cultivators are flocking to this place. Hiziji said. Naturally, this was also the reason why they were here. Seeing that Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue were deep in thought, Hiziji thought that they were also tempted. He raised his hand and pointed forward. Yes, that heavenly Yin mountain is the place for tomorrow's trial. Brother Baili, if the two of you want to participate, you can go there tomorrow. Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue were both using aliases. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Go directly? That's right. As long as you are not over 35 years old and have reached a certain level of talent and strength, you can participate in the trial after passing the gatekeeper's test. Gatekeeper? That's right. The most outstanding batch of people selected from the trial will be able to follow the gatekeeper to the Divine Ruins world. As Hiziji spoke, his face revealed a hint of longing. It could be seen that he was indeed filled with anticipation for this matter. Rong Xiu's expression became somewhat meaningful. It seemed that this trial was specially organized by someone. That's right, the other party deliberately attracted so many talented cultivators, so they naturally had to make all the arrangements. However, Hiziji and the others did not realize what Rong Xiu was thinking. They only thought that he was still thinking about participating in the trial. As they spoke, the group walked to the door of an inn. The trial would begin tomorrow, so they naturally had to rest well today. Hiziji and the others chose to stay here. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu were too lazy to bother and also stayed. After the two sides said goodbye, they each returned to their own rooms. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu's rooms were on the third floor, facing the street. When they opened the window, they could see the bustling crowd on the street. Looking into the distance, they could see row upon row of houses in the city, as well as, in the distance, the towering heavenly Yin mountain. Chu Luiyue crossed her arms and leaned against the window coffin. She could not help but smile. I didn't expect that after so many troubles in there, it's still like this when I come out. I've been away for so long, but there are still people thinking about me. Rong Xiu poured a cup of tea. White mist rose in spirals, enshrouding his handsome face. Madam is too outstanding, that's why people can't forget you. Chu Luiyue snorted softly. I don't think it's a good thing to be remembered like this. Someone was deliberately revealing her whereabouts, but she did not even know who the other party was. She really did not like the feeling of the enemy being in the dark while she was in the light. I have always felt that the appearance of this Yunzhou is very strange. Chu Luiyue raised her hand, and her slender white fingernails lightly scratched the hollow wooden window. Her eyes flashed. Although the entire city looks quite old, many places in the city have obviously just been renovated. Look, even the paint on the window is newly painted. But the workmanship is very meticulous. Everything looked tidy, clean, and simple. Most people would not be able to tell. What's more, most of the people who came here were cultivators participating in the trial. Who would pay attention to this? Rong Xiu picked up the teacup, lowered his eyes, and put it down again with a half-smile. Maybe it was not an accident to come here from Peach Blossom Dock? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1994. Chu Luiyue's eyes lit up. You mean, the gate realm leads directly to this place? Rong Xiu's smile deepened. We'll know when we go to the heavenly Yin mountain tomorrow. The entire cloud state was immersed in excitement and excitement. Early in the morning, Chu Luiyue was woken up by all kinds of noises outside. He could even hear a few familiar voices outside the door. Big brother, are you really going to ask those two to come with us? Xilan asked arrogantly. I think they don't even know what this trial is, so they probably won't go. Let's not bother about them. She really didn't like those two. Their appearances and clothes were clearly very ordinary, but when they saw them, they didn't show any respect at all. She really didn't know what was so good about those two. Hiziji glanced at her. More friends means more pats. Why don't you understand this principle? Why don't I understand? I think Big Brother is the one who's confused. If they really participate in the trial, won't they become our competitors? Who would find themselves competitors? Hiziji shook his head and didn't intend to continue persuading her. His sister didn't have a bad heart, but she was spoiled, willful, and narrow-minded. There were so many people who came to participate in the trial, and there were almost countless competitors. What difference would one or two more people make to the result? On the contrary, if he could rope them in, he might have a higher chance of winning in the final competition. He had a feeling that these two people weren't so ordinary. Thinking of this, Hiziji walked over. Just as he raised his hand and was about to knock, the door was pulled open from the inside. A tall figure appeared in front of him. Hiziji's movements froze. Brother Bailey, why you're already up? From the looks of it, what they said just now had probably been heard. Hiziji was embarrassed. Rong Xiu only nodded with a normal expression. My wife and I also plan to go to the heavenly Yin mountain today. Hiziji looked at him and found that he didn't seem to have any intention of pursuing the matter. He couldn't help but secretly sigh in relief. He didn't know why, but in front of this man he always felt an inexplicable sense of reverence. Even though the other party had always been very polite and courteous, the natural nobility and pressure that seemed to come from his bones was still hard to ignore. Then let's go together. When the time comes we can take care of each other. What does Brother Bailey think? Hiziji asked nervously. That couldn't be better. Chu Luiyue walked up from behind and said with a smile. Hiziji was slightly taken aback. He didn't notice it yesterday, but now that he was standing close to her, he realized that this woman actually had a pair of extremely beautiful eyes. Especially when he smiled. As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, Rong Xiu turned around and reached out his hand to Chu Luiyue. He conveniently blocked Hiziji's line of sight. Only then did Hiziji come to his senses. He immediately retracted his gaze, feeling vexed in his heart. It wasn't as if he had never seen a beautiful woman before, so it was rather rude of him to do so. He took a step back. Then shall we go over now? Otherwise there will be a lot of people on the street later. The moment they stepped out of the door, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu realized what Hiziji meant. Because the number of people on the street was much more than yesterday. It was still early in the morning. In a while it would really be crowded. Chu Luiyue looked at the lively crowd and suddenly said, "There are so many people here. Quite a number of people have come. I'm afraid that many geniuses from various empires have rushed over," He Xilan sneered. Of course. As a cultivator who doesn't want to cross the gate realm and enter the divine ruins world and become a high god expert. Even if the hope was slim and there were many difficulties, there were still people who came one after another. As she spoke, she scanned Chu Luiyue from head to toe and snorted. People like you basically have no chance. When Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu came, they had deliberately suppressed their cultivation bases. He Xilan only thought that the two of them were not high in cultivation, so she did not put them in her eyes. Chu Luiyue was not angry at this and only smiled indifferently. Her purpose for coming here was different from theirs. Seeing Chu Luiyue's reaction, He Xilan felt as if her fist had landed on cotton. She was a little angry, so she simply snorted coldly and did not say anything else. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly said softly, "So you're saying that those who had the best results in the trial all entered the divine ruins world?" "Of course." He Xilan replied resolutely. If not for that, why would so many people come to the cloud region? This woman's question was truly laughable. Just as she was about to ridicule him a little more, she heard Chu Luiyue continue, "Then have those people ever returned after entering the divine ruins world?" He Xilan was stunned, and then looked at her as if she was looking at a monster. Of course not. After going to the divine ruins world, who would return here? The divine ruins world was an existence that everyone yearned to go to. If one had the opportunity to go there, break through the shackles and become a high god powerhouse or even stronger, how many cultivators yearned for this the most? Who would return? A dark light flashed in Chu Luiyue's eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. He Xilan wanted to say something else, but she was pulled by Hiziji, so she could only shut up. After that, the group did not say anything else and just continued forward. There were more and more people around them. Mixed in the crowd, they were not very eye-catching. They were like drops of water merging into a river, swept in the direction of the heavenly Yin mountain. After about an hour, they finally arrived at the foot of the heavenly Yin mountain. The terrain here was open and everyone stood in groups of 3 to 5. From afar, it was a vast expanse of darkness. There were at least 500 to 600 people. Furthermore, these people could be considered rare cultivation geniuses outside of the divine ruins. Even Chu Luiyue had never seen so many talented young cultivators gathered together in the Tianling dynasty. There should be a lot of cultivators from the dynasty here. But with so many people gathered together, it was not noisy. Most people did not speak much and only a few whispered a few words. There was an inexplicable tension in the atmosphere. Obviously, they were all quite concerned about the trial that was about to begin. Chu Luiyue's gaze swept across the crowd intentionally or unintentionally. She actually wanted to see if there were people from the Tianling dynasty here. Suddenly, her eyes narrowed. In the crowd in the distance, there was a young man standing alone. He was only wearing a loose gray linen shirt, and there were no extra accessories on his body. His already thin figure became even thinner. Her soft, short, golden hair glowed faintly under the morning sun. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. Xiaozhou. Digression, 6:30 a.m. Mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1995. Almost at the same time, Xiaozhou sensed her gaze and raised his head to look over. The moment he saw Chu Luiyue, his eyes widened slightly. Surprise, joy, disbelief, many emotions surged out, almost causing his emotions to surge. He subconsciously raised his leg, intending to come over. Chu Luiyue shook her head calmly. The small boat immediately understood and stopped in its tracks. He forced himself to look away. I almost forgot, this is Cloud State. There were still many people watching him in the dark. He could not act rashly at this time, lest he bring her any trouble. Thinking of this, Xiaozhou lowered his head slightly as if nothing had happened. All of this happened in the blink of an eye, and there was a crowd between the two sides, so even if someone noticed Xiaozhou's momentary daze, they would not be able to tell what was going on. Chu Luiyue quickly retracted her gaze. However, her heart was still beating rapidly. She never thought that she would run into Xiaozhou here. When she decided to go to the Divine Ruins world, Xiaozhou was still unconscious. Chu Luiyue could only leave him behind. Who would have thought that they would meet again here? She did not know how his body was now and why did he appear here alone. Countless questions surged in her mind. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. Rong Xiu followed her gaze and immediately understood why she had such a reaction. He held her hand. His slightly calloused palm was broad, strong and very warm. Chu Luiyue's heart gradually calmed down. Since everyone was here, there was no hurry to meet each other. Let's see what the heavenly Yin mountain was like first. Just as she was thinking, the sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Chu Luiyue subconsciously looked up and saw a figure flying up from the top of the heavenly Yin mountain. Noticing the commotion, everyone quieted down completely and raised their heads to look. Some people could not help but reveal excited expressions, and their eyes were filled with admiration as they looked at that person. Chu Luiyue had a faint guess in her heart. This person, perhaps, Heavenly Yin Mountain Gatekeeper, Hong En. Welcome, everyone, to participate in the trial today. As expected, Chu Luiyue's mind calmed down. This person was indeed the so-called gatekeeper. She narrowed her eyes slightly and carefully sized up that person. He floated in the air, high and mighty. He looked to be in his 30s and was not tall, but the pressure from his body could not be ignored. "My God," Chu Luiyue's thoughts. This kind of strength was very common in the Divine Ruins world, but here, it was an extremely top-level existence. Sure enough, as soon as the pressure spread out, the expressions of the many cultivators at the foot of the mountain became solemn. The expression between their brows became even more respectful and careful. This was that person's goal. That person looked around and revealed a somewhat satisfied expression. His deep and sonorous voice continued to ring out. "The rules of the trial are very simple." Chu Luiyue could not help but chuckle in her heart. The rules were simple indeed. She just did not know what they were planning to do to the Heavenly Yin Mountain. Of course, if you want to participate in this trial, you have to pass the examination first. As Hong En spoke, he waved his sleeve. A palm-sized bronze mirror instantly flew out of his sleeve. The bronze mirror fell from the sky and grew with the wind. But, with a muffled sound, the bronze mirror stabbed straight into the ground. At this moment, it was already as tall as a person. The mirror was covered in rust and looked very old. However, the expressions of the people present became more and more serious when they saw this item. They all understood that this was a hurdle that they had to pass. Whether they could participate in the trial depended on this. If they could not pass the examination, then all their previous preparations would be in vain. "I'll go first." A voice sounded from the crowd. Then a young man walked forward. There was nervousness on his face, but more than that, there was excitement and excitement. Under everyone's gaze, he walked step by step to the bronze mirror. Hong En said, "Don't be nervous. Just try to come over." The young man's Adam's apple bobbed. He nodded, took a deep breath and walked forward. Then his leg successfully stepped into the bronze mirror. Chu Luiyue stood at the side and could clearly see that the young man's leg had indeed reached the other side of the bronze mirror. The mirror, which looked a little dim earlier, was now like a ripple. It swayed gently without any obstruction. The young man looked delighted and continued to walk forward. In the blink of an eye, he successfully walked through the bronze mirror. I passed. He cheered excitedly. Hong En nodded satisfactorily. "Very good. You can go up the mountain now." "Yes." The young man was greatly encouraged and immediately rushed up the mountain excitedly. The forest was dense, and his figure soon disappeared behind the trees. Everyone watched with different expressions. Some were envious, some were jealous. Everyone began to go up one after another. However, not everyone could pass through the bronze mirror. Chu Luiyue watched from the side and realized that about 1/5 of the people were rejected by the bronze mirror. That was equivalent to being eliminated. Looking at the dejected people, Chu Luiyue touched his chin. I wonder what the standards of the bronze mirror are. However, the bronze mirror looked very familiar. Chu Luiyue had a vague guess in his heart. However, before he found clear evidence, he had to remain skeptical. "Brother, let's go," He Xilan urged. He Ziji took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay." At this moment, there was a sudden commotion in front of them. Chu Luiyue looked over and immediately frowned. Xiaozhou was standing in front of the bronze mirror. Half of his arm had already reached in. It was obvious that he could enter smoothly. However, he lowered his head slightly and for some reason he pulled his arm back. This action shocked everyone present. Hong An's expression was also slightly serious. "What's wrong with you?" Mobile users, Please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1996. Xiao Zhou retracted his hand, took a step back and said indifferently, "I don't want to participate in this trial anymore. I quit." As soon as he said that, everyone was shocked. The scene suddenly fell into an awkward silence. Many people looked at each other. What was going on? He said he didn't want to participate and he didn't want to? Half of his arm had already reached in, and now he said he wanted to quit? This was too casual. Hong An obviously did not expect Xiao Zhou to say such a thing, and his expression turned cold. Are you sure? There were countless cultivators who wanted to participate in this trial. This was the first time he had seen someone suddenly want to quit halfway through. Moreover, it was obvious that he could get it through the review. It's good that he quit. This way we'll have one less competitor. That's right. He doesn't want to participate, but there are many people who want to participate. He really doesn't know what's good for him. All kinds of discussions could be heard in low voices. Little Boat's expression seemed to waver a little. He pursed his lips and after a moment he said hesitantly, "Let me think about it." After saying that, he took a few steps back and made way. There was a burst of laughter from the crowd. Think about it again? Who did he think he was to put on airs like this? The gatekeeper's temper was not that easy to deal with. Hong An also frowned and he was very annoyed. He had never encountered such a situation before. Those who were able to come here were all here for cultivation. Who would repeat this? He was about to reprimand him when his gaze suddenly froze. That young man was actually a rank 9 warrior? And it seemed that he was only a step away from breaking through to the high god realm. He didn't look old either. Among these people he was indeed one of the best. Thinking of this, he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. If he really let him go, it would be a great loss. Hong An hesitated for a moment and his expression relaxed. Then I'll give you some more time to think about it. Everyone was in an uproar. Obviously, they did not expect Hong An to be so lenient and give the young man a chance to go back on his word. Xiao Zhou heard this, but there was not much surprise on his beautiful and exquisite face. He just nodded. Continue. With Hong An's order, the others no longer cared about the small boat and began to line up again for the inspection. After that, the process went very smoothly. He Ziji and He Xilan successfully passed, but the remaining people who came with them were all eliminated. He Ziji then turned to look at Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue. He was also very curious as to whether the two of them could pass. Rong Xiu walked in front. His expression was calm as he walked forward. The surface of the bronze mirror flowed past him like water. With a single step, he crossed the bronze mirror and successfully passed. Chu Luiyue followed behind Rong Xiu. After Rong Xiu went over, it was her turn. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes as he recalled Xiao Zhou's reaction. He was on high alert. Of course, Xiao Zhou would not do that for no reason. He had his own considerations and at the same time, he was warning her. Chu Luiyue suppressed her aura as much as possible and walked forward. Buzz. The moment she touched the surface of the mirror, alarm bells went off in her head. The water droplet that had been quietly floating in her dantian seemed to be summoned by some kind of power and was ready to move. Fortunately, Chu Luiyue was already prepared. She took the initiative and forcefully restrained the force around her body, stopping the flow. The fluctuation that was about to rise was forcefully suppressed just like that. Her hand smoothly reached out to the water like mirror. Then she took a step forward and passed smoothly. The whole process only took a few breaths. From the beginning to the end, Chu Luiyue's expression did not change at all. She was as calm as ever. No one knew what she had experienced in that moment. Rong Xiu reached out his hand to her. Chu Luiyue then realized that her palms were drenched in sweat when Chu Luiyue's warm and dry hands held them. Rong Xiu's fingertips gently rubbed the back of her hand. Chu Luiyue's heart finally calmed down. She looked at the bronze mirror with a complicated gaze. There was a very strange power hidden inside. When she passed by, she could clearly feel that someone was observing her. That feeling sent a chill down her spine. However, it was clear that the people in the surroundings did not notice anything amiss. Those who passed were excited and happy. Those who failed were lonely and regretful. Chu Luiyue's eyes drooped slightly as she thought to herself. Little Boat should have felt the existence of that strange power before, that's why. Brother Baili, I heard that the Heavenly Yin Mountain is very dangerous. Let's go up together so that we can take care of each other. How about it? He Ziji was clearly waiting here for this plan. Although He Xilan was somewhat dissatisfied, seeing that Rong Xiu and Baili had successfully passed the examination, she could not say anything more. Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue looked at each other for a moment. Okay. After discussing, they headed up the mountain together. They were not slow and quickly entered the forest. After walking for a distance, Chu Luiyue turned around to take a look. Through the dense forest, she could still vaguely see the scene in the bronze mirror. When she turned back, Little Boat just happened to raise his leg and smoothly passed through the bronze mirror. Everything looked no different from the others. However, he did not team up with anyone and continued to be alone. After standing still for a moment, he chose to go up the mountain alone. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze. A quarter of an hour passed quickly. Chu Luiyue and the others walked in the forest, but did not encounter any problems. The wind blew through the forest, making rustling sounds. This place doesn't seem to be as dangerous as the legends say? He Xilan muttered in a low voice. She had been nervous for so long. We just came in. Whether there is danger or not, we will know later. He Ziji's expression was very serious. Young master you said before that the duration of this trial is a month? Chu Luiyue suddenly asked. Although this heavenly mountain is tall and steep, it shouldn't take that long to climb to the top, right? Even an ordinary person without any cultivation base would finish climbing in 2 or 3 days. If it was a cultivator, it would only be faster. Even if there were some traps and dangers in the middle, a month's time was indeed a bit long. He Ziji said, because this is only half of the trial. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Actually, you are right. Generally speaking, it only takes a few days to reach the top of the mountain. And the order of climbing to the top of the mountain also determines the ranking of the trial. But after that, everyone will have to stay at the top of the mountain for a while until a month later, the gatekeeper will bring people to the Divine Ruins world. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.